Hey everybody, and welcome to the podcast that's dedicated to making you a faster cyclist, the Ask a Cycling Coach podcast presented by Trainer Road. I'm Coach Jonathan Lee with our head coach, Chad Zimmerman.
Hi, everybody.
Our CEO, Nate Pearson.
Hi, everybody.
Nate got here just in time today, just fresh back from a conference. We're here to answer your cycling and triathlon related questions that you've submitted through trainerroad.com/podcast. We appreciate you guys doing that. Continue to do that. I recently asked for people to send in their most simple or perhaps most vexing questions, whatever they may have, and I feel like the quality of questions has gone up like dramatically, and the quantity. So thank you guys. Really appreciate that. With this,
what makes a bad question, and what makes a good question?
Okay, so a bad question is when somebody has a situation that's so unique to them that it isn't applicable to many.
There's no learnings.
Yeah, because if I'm asking about a very specific thing, I learn, but the many other people listening to the podcast don't learn.
Yeah, don't get too special snowflake with it.
Yep.
But sometimes you could be a little special snowflake.
A little,
you think
sure.
it is,
Sure.
but there's actually
because it has a broader application than you might think.
We do one step back, and there's a huge principle behind it.
One that I see commonly, or one style of question that I see commonly submitted, is when people don't provide the detail that we would really need. And it's kind of like, this is happening to me. What do you think it is? And we could go on for an entire podcast just on guessing what that
Someone
might be.
might say, I did a plan and my fitness didn't improve. Why is
Exactly
that?
right.
Without any detail, like what your level was at, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah,
And
give us something to work with.
Yeah, we can do some detective work by looking at your account, that sort of thing. But when we have, hundreds and hundreds of other questions that are submitted that might be better in that case, then we'll obviously go for the ones that will have more detail for us to run with, Other ones that we look for, we also look for ones that are just kind of fun or entertaining, or like certain topics that perhaps us cyclists wonder about regularly, and then we can chime in on.
This happens to me all the time. Does it happen to other people?
Totally, yeah.
Especially if it's embarrassing.
Exactly. Yeah, that always makes for fun conversation. And then the other side of things is I look for ones where perhaps it's like a bit of knowledge where I feel like, yeah, a lot of people misunderstand this, or we don't know the answer to this. And then we sick Chad on that. And Chad starts getting into the research and looking into things. And then we find out if we have a good answer for that. So that's kind of the process. So continue to do it. We love it. Thank you so much. For those that don't know, we also stream this podcast live, and you can join us. It's usually every Thursday at 8 a.m. Pacific. In this case, we're on a Friday. But that's on our Facebook and YouTube channels. You can just look for Trainer Road. You'll find us there. Before we go any further, we should talk about travel tips for races. But when you're traveling to a race in a car, and this is a good example of something that's like very cycling culture. It's something that we come across regularly. However, and it's things that other people just don't think about.
Yes, I think we do it a lot here because we have to drive a far distance, but it's really the same if you're going driving near or far.
Sure.
The problem is at most bike races, there's no like amenities. There's not like a gas station there with water or like a restaurant that has the kind of food that you want to eat. Usually they're out in the middle of nowhere because that's where there's no cars.
Right. Yeah.
So I think I've put together a list, and I'm really happy with what I do now. And then you guys please chime in too.
And I can share so many bad examples. So you have a lot of good things on what to do, and then I can share so many bad examples of what I have done before on this sort of thing.
Okay, great. So
I don't have a whole lot of I've done great on this.
First thing is, I think it's really key to get a small travel cooler. It doesn't have to be a super fancy one, but a small one that you can fit in the front seat of your car, or if someone's driving with you, like right behind. Because a key thing is, if you have to put the cooler all the way in the back, especially if it's a long drive, you're less likely to access it. So be safe when you're driving.
Being the point with this, you want to access it regularly because you want to make sure that you're topped off. You want to make sure that you aren't going into a race without the hydration or nutrition that you need, right?
Depending on it could be races an hour away, you're not going to be eating anything. But if it's many hours drive, or like sometimes we'll have 2 races back to back over days.
Or an early morning, for like
you might be eating on the drive over to save sleep. So doing a 3-hour drive in the morning is not uncommon for us,
right?
Which is annoying.
Yeah.
But yeah, eat. And so here's what I put in that cooler. One, I do almond milk just because it's a less likely. One, I'm not eating dairy right now, but 2, I would do it anyways because it's less likely to spoil than milk. And that just scares me. I like a whole wheat cracker, peanut butter. And this could be too, you might not eat before the race, but between races if you're doing multiple races.
Right.
Or if you're a triathlete, a lot of times you have to go the day before. You do like packet pickup and stuff. And then again, there's no food options, and you're like freaking out here. Peanut butter, hummus. I did that for like after the races. Apples, bananas. And the other one that I really like is muesli. So Bob's Red Mill Muesli, which is like raw oats, dates, seeds, and nuts.
And you basically just put that almond milk in there, and it's ready
Yeah.
to eat.
Yeah, I don't do.
It's
I
not
don't
like
overnight.
steel cut oats or overnight oats.
You're basically eating raw oats, but I think it's really good, and the amount of like calories you can get in there is huge. A lot of carbs, good carbs, fiber, some fat.
Complex carbs, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So I do that the morning of, and I do it the night before too to get like more. But if I was I did this when I did the 2 bike races, but also as a triathlete, that'd be great because it's so easy. You just bring a bowl and a spoon, and you're ready to go.
Totally. Could you drink it perhaps? Like if you had it in a bottle
Nope.
and like that?
It is too
thick.
yeah.
Got
It's a lot of people won't like the taste because it's not very sweet, and you got to chew it and stuff. You could do any kind of cereal. I think just the dense cereal is best. So like Ezekiel would be another good cereal to be able to do that.
Yeah.
The other thing I did for Amber had this like kind of eat something savory and a little bit of protein between the races.
Yeah.
Is Annie's makes a soup can with a pull top. And I just discovered Annie's the brand.
Yeah.
I don't know if they have them worldwide.
Our kid, that's what the mac and cheese for our son. That's like the Annie's stuff is the best to do.
It's good stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like lentil vegetable. There's no ingredients other than vegetables and maybe some olive oil and salt at the end. But you can open that thing. You could drink out of it.
Totally.
But even like lukewarm that would be sitting in a car, it was good.
Yeah.
Or cold. It was really good to do that. And it was so much better than eating bars all day, like sweet stuff. Yeah.
You can even get, and if you have kids, I'm sure you know about this, but you can even get like the little pop tops that basically like it's a little top that goes on top of it and gives you an easy drinking spout. So like it's nice to, the point being these things are portable and easy to eat. And in the case of Annie's, it's not like Campbell's soup where it's like who knows what's in there. In this case, it's just a very short list of ingredients.
Yeah. So that's another thing is your triathlete day before, you could get a couple cans of that. You could try it in training, and that could be your carb intake because it's hard. You go to a race and you're like, okay, I want to eat a certain amount of carbs and vegetables, and you go there and all they have is like fish and chips. And you're like, that's so much fat for me right now, something like that. Okay.
Right.
Here's a lot of people already know that stuff. Here's the really good tips. Okay. First tip. This is
if you're watching on the podcast right now, you can see what he's doing. He has a very, very large mug with him.
This is such a great present for cyclists. I think as people get older, it's harder to buy them presents. This is a luxury, totally a luxury. Yeah. But if you get it for somebody, it's awesome. This is a 1 gallon Yeti jug.
It's gigantic.
But it's insulated. But the cool part about this is what I do is I fill this up with water, a little bit of ice. It stays cold for multiple days, even in a hot car.
Yeah.
And then I have my 2 bottles, or maybe I might have a smaller bottle to drink out of, but my 2 race bottles, and I'll refill it here with water, and then I bring the powdered stuff so I can remake it.
Nice.
Before, what I was doing is I'd have in my cooler, I'd put 8 different cycling bottles.
Yeah.
And then that fills up all your space. Yeah. They never stay cold in the cooler.
Or you go to the store and you buy a bunch of plastic water bottles, and that's an absolute hassle to deal with. Not to mention you're buying a bunch of plastic.
Yep.
Yeah.
So just refilling it right out of here. And I find for one day, because really if you go to a hotel and you have multiple days, you can refill it. For one day, it's great. And then afterwards, after the race too, it's always hard to find water, right? Your bottles are empty.
Yeah.
You go back, you have ice cold water.
And cold water is an impossibility.
Yeah, nothing's worse than driving home from a race and all you want is cold water and you can't get any.
Not with the Yeti 1 gallon jug. But this thing's expensive. It's like $129. That's why it's a good Christmas present for somebody. And the other thing I have now is I have powdered beets. So I don't know how to. They're I don't know. I'll just call them powdered beets. But you can buy it online.
That's what they are.
They're $20, and you can mix that with the water. So I do a little bit of that before the race. Beets have been shown to give you an improvement in performance.
Yeah.
And you can get that right before. But having beet juice that's fresh is super hard. I've done that.
Yeah.
You don't want it to hit the air very long because it would oxidize. And it's too much usually, but this you can make it really concentrated. That's awesome.
And then you also have something that you are using during that crit that we did recently to actually keep your. So you have a Tesla, right? So it's not like that sort of thing that you're just I'm going to lean my car or my bike against my car. You actually brought a bike stand, but it's not like a work stand.
Yeah. The next thing, this is amazing. And when I had a truck, I sell the same thing.
Yeah.
It's better than leaning your bike against your car.
For sure.
And my truck had a whole bunch of scratches on it because no matter how well you lean against it, it always touches.
Something happens, yeah.
Feedback Sports rack stand. I like this because it's a collapsible stand that you can fit in your car. And then when you open it up, you can fit even a pretty fat mountain bike tire in it.
Yep.
And your bike just stands up.
Yeah, it's like what you see at some dealerships have them to display a single bike. It's not like what they have to display a bunch of bikes in a row. But those things are super helpful to have.
But and two, if you have a team, though, they come with these little things that can connect multiple ones together.
Oh, that's cool.
So you could have multiple bikes stand up. Nice. I might put this in our... Man, we could just we'll lean our bikes against the motorhome. That's like a more durable outside thing. I think we'll scratch that, but for 24 hours.
Right.
But this is another great present, I think, because people don't realize you need it, and then you get it, and you're like, I use it.
How'd I live without this?
Exactly.
Yep.
I only use this.
Totally.
It's the first thing I take out, and I set it up. Yeah. And even between races, I'll just leave it out. I find people don't steal things at bike races.
Neither of you remember the brand that I have. That it's like an L-shaped thing with two little prongs that you set your cog set in.
Oh, yeah.
So the same thing. I can't remember what the brand is, but it's just as handy. It doesn't collapse like yours does, so it'd be a little harder to pack.
Where those get complex, I've found. So those are, you can find them by looking up like any, look up bike stand. You'll try to have to filter out for work stand when you see that sort of thing. But the spot where those get difficult are with 29er mountain bikes. Because they do make some that are heights, extra tall, but then also it's difficult to make them fit in. We can see producer Ian's looking at Feedback
That's
Sports
it, the
right
rack.
now.
The rack, our RAKK stand. So in our forum notes, we'll have it all.
Absolutely. So you can go to forum.trainerroad.com, look up episode 196, and then you'll see it there. But those things I've found too, sometimes it's difficult when you have disc brakes, wider rear hubs, that sort of stuff. Sometimes I have a few of them where they don't fit.
I have a couple different heights. So there are different heights for different bikes. So it's probably not as versatile as the one Nate's talking about.
Here's why those are super important though. I see a lot of people hanging up mountain bikes vertically on a wall or maybe even upside down. And what happens when you do that sort of thing is that your suspension is not designed to have oil resting on things. And over time, what happens is it will either saturate your seals to the point where the seals are so wet that they just collect dirt, and then that ruins your seals and then can scratch your stanchions, or it just ruins the actual action of your suspension.
Does it change things if you hang the bike upside versus downside?
No, it really wouldn't. I guess if you look at it, it'd probably be worse upside because of the head tube angle. It'd be slightly inverted. But the point is, if you can store your bikes right side up, it's better across the board. I actually had a bike that I thought my fork was messed up. I got it serviced, and I was like, my fork's still messed up. And it was because I was hanging it upside down. I had a slightly lower quality Fox fork, and as a result, the oil would leak out of the seals.
Shucks, all my bikes are hanging up in the garage right now.
So it's
probably going to take the mountain bikes off.
Yeah, it's a small, and like I said, with a road bike, it doesn't matter at all, right? Yeah. But with a mountain bike, you have a dropper post, front suspension, and rear suspension. All three of those components have oil in them, and then as a result, it can cause issues.
Okay, so
good tip.
You've got your cooler with your food, your gallon jug. Also with that powdered stuff, like Scratch has individual packets, so I bought a set of those because even if taking like a whole big bag of powder is messy,
better than the big bag.
But you just take it off. Yeah. I also do I have like a Ziploc full of nutrition that I just refill because you go to a race and you're like, okay, how many gels do I need? And you count it out. I rather have a stocked up like large Ziploc that just has like more than I would need for any race.
Right.
And then race morning, I can make the decision, do I want the caffeine gel or what flavor do I want? And it just takes out the planning before races. Yeah. And then after the race, you just refill it up. The powdered beets, that's good. You got the soup, you have the stand. The thing I always forget, I have two more tips, is a trash bag.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Always forget a trash bag. And I don't think I've ever not forgotten a trash bag. So it sounds simple, but on the checklist, Ian, can we put that on our checklist? And the last thing, which is really handy, is a rain bag.
Yeah.
Which is a weird name. I would not brand it rain bag. Rain bag's like what it is just a small cycling specific bag.
Yeah.
They call it rain bags because it's supposed to be like your follow car. If it starts raining, they give you a rain bag and it has like your rain gear in it. But inside this bag, I have like this is the Scicon bag.
Scicon, SCICON. Yeah, and this bag, this one's pretty special. Like all of us have this one. I really like it. It has on the ends, so like basically it's a rectangle. If you're listening to the podcast, I'll describe what it looks like. It's a rectangle, right? And that rectangle basically has two zippers on top, two zippers on bottom, and then the ends can completely open up. So the zippers on the top and bottom, they're actually labeled. So you have a spot for your jersey and shorts, or your jacket and vest, or your warmers, or your
nicely
socks.
designed, yeah.
And then when you actually have things, when you open up the ends of that cube to be able to stuff things in there,
Tunnel.
yeah, a ton of room. It fits for me a helmet, shoes, glasses, gloves. That's what I usually put in there. And then the cool part is on one side it's fully sealed off. On the other side it's mesh. And when you take everything out of the center of the rectangle, Nate's trying to take things out right now. I'm probably going to tear a shoe or a helmet. When you take things out of there, you can unzip the mesh side, push a liner back. So then at that point you have a venting spot. So then when you have gross, ugly, dirty, nasty, stinky gear, you can just put it in the side that's vented, and then it no longer stinks. So you can, if you're on the podcast, you can probably see Nate is emptying the thing of all of his gear.
It's got a lot of stuff in there. The other thing inside of it, I have this little e-bag. So if you travel a lot, you go on Amazon. E-bags are like these little zippable small containers that you put into a larger container.
Packing cubes, they're called.
Yeah,
a lot
packing
of the time.
cubes. Yeah. So I have a little e-bag, and inside of here I have like sunscreen lotion, a small torque wrench, chamois, sunscreen, caffeine pills, stuff like that, and it's very handy. So this. I have duplicate ones. Besides the sunglasses, I move those around. Everything's duplicate in here. So when it's time to go, and even this bag, I have my vest and stuff in there. I just leave my vest and my warmers in there.
We actually have 3 of those bags.
Yeah.
For different sports.
Road and recovery.
Yeah, that is a little bit too. Well, I have a tech one too.
We're hyper
Fussy.
They'll put your name on
organized.
it.
There we
Trek.
go.
I actually
like
am going to try.
Much better, Chad.
I'm going to try a new one from Trek, which is a little bit bigger,
Yeah.
because I find this one. You saw how tightly I pack that. Just if it could be, but it's probably all bags. If it, you always want it to be a little bit bigger because you
Always
fit
gonna
more
be
stuff in
just
it.
too small.
My ask for rain bags is I want them to have backpacks, straps. Like they can be detachable. Something like Patagonia does that with a lot of their bags. They have detachable straps. But I've found myself at times where I have to park in one spot, but then I'm staging in a totally different spot for a race.
Yeah.
And then I have to carry wheel bags, and then I have to carry another bag of all my rain stuff just in
Yeah,
case
you're
or
right.
that different.
Bike.
So it'd be really sweet if I could just strap them on my back.
So what you need is a triathlon bag, because triathlon bags, they have wetsuits and stuff, and those are triathlon bags are awesome. For those who don't know, they fit everything in it. They're like large backpacks.
This is my
Yeah.
favorite type of bag. I've got a zip one. Just that zip's design. They accounted for everything. There's compartments for every single thing you could imagine in a triathlon, which means it covers all the road racing bases.
Yep. So
That's
that would be
nice.
good for you. I like these actually too because they're so small.
That's the nice thing. If they could be that small, but then just have backpack straps.
Yeah.
I'd be
Or
all
like a
for it.
messenger bag strap.
Totally.
That
Yeah.
would be
Just
good.
anything to be able to ride with it
The
hands
zip one
free.
has backpack straps.
Yeah, that thing is impressive.
Yeah,
I've seen
cool bag.
yours. I feel like I could fit in there. So, so with that, let's get into Lou Abowski's post from the forum. This is forum.trainerroad.com. You should join the rest of the folks there. Tons of interesting conversation happening nonstop. So I'm going to run through his question. Then, Chad, you've developed a whole lot of stuff on this one, and we'll end up running through it. But I feel like it's common for people to wonder this. He says, I'm skipping Pettit today as my legs still feel a little tired from yesterday's workout. This got me thinking about 1 hour zone 2 workouts like Pettit. He asks, are there any benefits to doing these rides? Surely they are too short and too easy. They just seem like extra TSS without any real benefit. He says, if I was riding outside, I might even call these something like junk miles. So what are your thoughts? Is there any science that would suggest otherwise? So you can jump into the forum. You can see plenty of folks have responded to this, but
Plenty.
This is us.
This is a hot topic.
This is us presenting. This is Chad presenting his opinion. on
Yes,
it.
here's
So-
my side of things. Here's why these workouts exist. First off, let's be clear. Zone 2, we term it endurance. So we're talking right around 60, maybe not even as high as 70. We typically land at 65% FTP. Seems like a good point. Whether or not you want to pad it by 5% or trim it by 5%, it's still going to carry about the same stress benefits, et cetera. And zone 2 in a 7-zone model, not the 3-zone model. We're not talking about threshold work here. We're talking about easy endurance work. I do think, and shame on us for doing this, I think we termed these TSS fillers a while back, and that has...
on the podcast,
Yeah, wrong connotation, because we're not looking to fill TSS. We're just talking about more stress, and really an easy form of stress, an easily digestible, easy one to tolerate, easy one to adapt to, and an easy one to decide. This is a little too easy for me today. I'm going to up the effort a little bit. It's a little too difficult today. I'm going to make this a recovery ride, or maybe I'm just going to skip the workout. So it's not to imply that it's not an important workout. It's just one of those workouts that if you're going to trim your training load, this is probably where you start.
Yeah.
And on the opposite, you can only do so much intensity. Our 5
Getting
watt
to
per
that.
kilo rider. Oh, well, okay. Our 5 watt per kilo rider here.
Yeah.
He even does Dan's a 30-minute I'm using air quotes, TSS
Recovery ride.
aerobic ride
Right.
in the morning.
That's a legit recovery ride.
Oh,
now.
is it? What
That's at
percentage is that?
50%.
Okay,
50.
50%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the same kind of thing though, just a little bit more time on the bike, a little
Yes,
more,
yes.
a little more stress,
And
maybe
with
not
it
as much.
Comes a lot of benefits.
And then he's doing a harder workout that same day.
So your point is
Yeah, so
fast
he's doing
riders.
a 2 a day.
Yeah, fast riders do this too.
Well, you got to do more volume. There's only one way to get more volume. You can't do all intervals forever.
Right.
I feel like you're reading ahead.
Oh, sorry, Chad.
You're poaching my answer.
Okay.
Okay, so
Erase that. We never heard it.
So just like Nate said, I mean, we're looking for greater training load, and this is one of the ways to acquire that. It is that simple. So at the end of the week, if you're doing more training stress than you did the prior week and you're handling it, it means your body's adapting to a higher load, greater work capacity, more workload, adaptation, greater work capacity. It is that simple. And then interval workouts can only get so big and so demanding. I mean, we can't just take a VO2 max workout and tack on 3 or 4 more intervals because you want this much more TSS. Or it gets a little dangerous when we're working with high intensity stuff. It has to be modulated. It has to be governed more tightly. So these are low stress, or some call them low strain rides, but with that comes endurance conditioning. There is a benefit to this. It's a different type of fatigue, but because it's a different type of fatigue, it allows us to kind of layer the different forms of stress on our body without overdoing it. So we can do some VO2 max work, we can do some muscle endurance work, and then when our bodies really can't take much more, we can layer on some aerobic work. And it doesn't have to be 2, 3, 5 hour rides in order for that endurance work to carry endurance benefit.
That's the big question
Yes.
people have, right?
Yes.
Totally.
Yeah.
They think that unless you have a ton of volume, there's absolutely
And
no
rightly
point.
so, because if this is all you did, if all you did was get on the bike every day and rode at 65% for 1 hour, and that was your training, that constituted your training, you're not going to get faster.
Right.
You're going to hover right there. You know, you'll incur some of the benefits that come along with this type of training, but you're never going to be a faster rider. But this is not what we're talking about. These are supplemental or complementary, really. These are layered on top of the other forms of stress we're incurring during the other days of the week. So there are basically 2 ways to stimulate aerobic adaptation, 2 different signaling pathways. One of them is based on calcium, one of them is based on how fast we deplete energy and AMP. So ATP gets degraded or gets broken down to ADP, gets broken down to ATP, AMP. That presence turns on particular signaling. Same with and this comes with high intensity training. With longer endurance, lower intensity training, you get what's called calcium signaling. So just constant calcium activity at the muscle level. That turns on the same type of signaling. So you got high intensity short term and low intensity long term riding. Both have the same downstream transcriptional effect.
Got it.
So you can get adaptation through 2 different mechanisms. But again, you can only do so much high intensity work. So why not attack it from the other side of things and do it with the low intensity stuff that the body tolerates, isn't such a disruption to your autonomic system, your sympathetic activities or response. And then as far as research on this sort of thing, there's really no shortage of it. And I just culled a couple. There's a 2015 review, and reviews look at many studies. So in particular, these guys sussed out, it was Milanovic, Sporus, and Weston. They sussed out 28 different studies that fulfilled a particular criteria, and they either looked at high intensity interval training or continuous endurance training, and recognized that the benefits are similar with both. They both achieve the same end game. So, and you know, of course, you're thinking, okay, so yeah, right. They had people doing high intensity interval training, and they had people doing long endurance rides. A lot of these consisted of 20-minute, 30-minute, and 60-minute endurance rides. They just did them with a high level of consistency, and these were probably athletes who weren't exceptionally well conditioned. But the fact is, they found the right stimulus to achieve adaptation, and they did it with low intensity work.
Yep. For most people listening to this podcast, they're probably an athlete that's higher than just like the base level, right?
Sure.
And and chances
But
are,
it's still. I mean, we just have to outpace what your body's currently used to.
right. So what I'm getting at here is that chances are you're doing some sort of intense work, and chances are you're preparing for an intense event, whatever that is, or intense day, something like that. So that's why you're doing the more intense work. That's why you're doing that sort of thing, specificity toward your race. But that doesn't mean that these sort of things, these sort of shorter workouts that are lower in intensity are not helpful.
Yes. And it's just because it's low level stress doesn't mean it's not stress. It's still muscle stress. And with that, following proper recovery, there's still adaptation. So low level stress is stress. Not riding at all, choosing to bypass this workout is no stress. There's nothing to be gained there. You might recover, but there are probably better ways to spend your time than doing nothing. In fact,
Right.
Well, it depends.
Almost.
Yeah.
It depends what level of fatigue you're experiencing at the
Exactly,
moment. Yes.
Yeah.
What about, I see people, so we have we have a feature now where you can extend the cool down. So let's say you do an interval set, and then maybe maybe even tomorrow you have a 30-minute aerobic ride like this or a 60-minute. What if you use the cool down feature, you extend it 30 or 60 minutes, and you raise it up to 60, 65%? Can you get benefits there?
Totally viable option, and you get a lot of the same benefits plus some, because if you nourish properly over the higher intensity portion of the workout, and then you head into this lower intensity portion of it and you stop your nourishment, you're effectively doing a fasted ride and getting some of the benefits that come with fasted riding. And even if you're not, you're taking fatigue and extending it to the fibers that probably didn't get cooked. So if you did a high intensity workout, maybe your slow twitch fibers are still firing on all cylinders, so you use this extra 30 or 40 minutes tacked on to the end of the workout to run those fibers down. Problem is, not a lot of athletes have more than an hour, hour and a half to train. So it's hard to tack on another hour of low intensity work. So we do it on a different day, but there are other reasons for doing it on a different day that I'll get to in a minute.
So that's a great thing so we have it in the higher volume plans. You'll see it where you'll do intervals, and then like in that plan, it'll be extra after that. But I like the idea of too, it's like all of one type of muscle fiber is cooked, and now you get the other one. So like your anaerobic's already cooked, and it's not like contributing at all. And then for some people, they can never do a Wednesday workout, right? Like Wednesday's not. So if you can't do it Wednesday at all, you could do it on that day.
Tack it onto this, please do.
Yep.
I mean, there are a lot of benefits to go with it, a lot of advantages to doing that.
Cool.
So let's get to what the intended goals are, why I have these workouts on Wednesday, these hour-long 65% workouts, and then in the high-volume plans, I have them on Friday too. Sometimes they're shorter, sometimes they're this very thing, hour of 60-ish%. Consistency. Above all else, consistency. We've talked many times about how the most important aspect of training is consistency. I mean, it's just, that's the way it is. So if we can get riders on the bike more days per week, they're probably going to see improvement, assuming they're not running themselves into the ground.
A common question I get, like personally, is people will reach out to me and say like, hey, Jonathan, which training plan is best for X, Y, and Z? And my basic answer before I answer any of that is the one that you can follow with consistency. Because whenever we look at athletes that are consistent, they may be doing a low volume plan while somebody may be trying to follow a high volume plan, but with very bad consistency. If you can follow that low volume with consistency.
That's actually a point I touch on coming up too. I definitely
quit
want to talk about that.
No, you need to read ahead.
That's fine. You're just kind of teasing it. So, and when you do these rides on Wednesday, or especially if you do them at the end of a longer or a different form of work, a high intensity workout, you get certain benefits. One of them being now you're operating in some level of glycogen depletion. And you're also, which of course, is akin to the fasted riding, where you get the certain mitochondrial bump and aerobic adaptations that take place because you're low on glycogen. Your body has to use fat, has to get good at using fat. But there's also might be a level of muscle damage. So your fatigued fibers aren't going to get recruited during this low intensity ride, which means your body's going to start to recruit fresher fibers, which means more recruitment, better recruitment patterns. So now you have more active fiber available for other training and racing.
And that is the one benefit that's hard to get, by those times that we get a different way, that you get from like the 5-hour ride, right? Is to really fatigue those muscles that take a long time to fatigue.
Yeah, so this is kind of a pre-exhaustion sort of method. You've already tired them or fatigued them so that it's easier to get at these fresher fibers.
Yeah. Do a sweet spot like right peak, where it's 3x30 at sweet spot, and then do some aerobic rides. You will be fatigued. But also with all of this stuff, we're talking about more volume. It's so easy to overdo it.
Oh yeah.
Like peak, I am cooked the next day. I don't want to do anything afterwards. My legs are all the fibers are cooked. Like they're all well done.
Yep.
So, and when we look at this from the perspective of time-constrained riders especially, there's really only one way to supplement, because you can't add more high-intensity work. I mean, if you're already doing 2, maybe 3 days of high intensity, adding a 4th day, I promise you is going to work for very few riders, if any.
Yeah.
You can do recovery in place of these if that's what's necessary. If you recognize getting on the bike that 65% is hard today, my body is very tired, even 65% isn't going to allow me to recover effectively, and I'm going to have a bad Thursday or weekend set of workouts as a consequence. So dial it down. Do a different workout, skip the workout altogether. So it makes it kind of one of the only options for increasing ride frequency. The only way we're going to get riders on the bike more frequently, and that consistency is hugely important, is to do it in a lower intensity manner. So by skipping these, you're basically sabotaging your consistency.
Yeah, that's a great point.
And then a super crucial point is that fitness is never stagnant. It's just not. It never hovers. You don't push yourself to a certain level of fitness and then it just stays there indefinitely. You have to maintain it. So it's either on the ascent or it's on the descent. That's it. It never stays in one place. And Ed Coyle, I think it was 2000, I don't even remember when, a few years back, had a study that he's a PhD, by the way, from the University of Texas at Austin, one of the preeminent researchers in endurance sports science. suggests that runners begin to detrain or lose their fitness after 48 to 72 hours. So it doesn't take long, but we're not talking big decrements in fitness. So nobody panic. It's not like 6 weeks of training is suddenly going to go out the window, but you get a slight downtick. It starts to trend downward, and every day that you don't do it, it continues to trend downward. So if we can get you on the bike to stave that decline off again and again and again, and we can do it in a low impact or a low intensity, low strain manner, why the heck not?
It's almost like if this conversation was happening before the time trial challenge, like if we had a time trial challenge coming up, because we're prepping for 24 hours in the Old Pueblo, and Nate had every intention of training consistently throughout this week, but he was at a conference where he wasn't able to train. And when he read 48 to 72 hours, he was totally thinking of this week. Were you not?
Yes. We tried to
So in other words, you're getting in his head, Chad. This is good.
We were cycling in the San Jose area, and we like bought Airbnb that's right next to these great mountains. And Pete and Brandon were with me. We're going to have Team Cliff Bar people were going to come with us. Jeff from NorCal Cycling was going to come with us.
Yeah.
But there's too much snow over the pass, so we could not get bikes over there. And we were just so bummed that we couldn't do that, because you just look around, there's beautiful mountains. Yeah. And I really haven't cycled all week. And then traveling is tough, and I'm super tired today.
Yeah.
But so here, Chad, I'm super tired from a conference, but I really want to train today.
Yeah, we have another question that's going to address that later on. So
basically
Nate's late to the party, so he's playing catch up.
Yeah,
he literally just got here.
Yeah.
Chad and I kind of prepared this episode for you.
Okay,
Nate.
well,
so it'll be good.
Thanks,
some
guys.
good stuff.
Yeah.
And then
It's going to answer you, but you're screwed.
one other tidbit of research, and again, I didn't have to look long and hard to find this stuff, so I assure you there's more out there. I'm just going to read this, just quote it. The evidence suggests that capillaries and aerobic enzymes can be developed effectively by multiple relatively short sessions, and that appreciable improvements in fat metabolism can be achieved with sessions of 45 minutes duration. Just 45 minutes.
Yeah.
So 60 minutes, I mean, we're definitely covering that base.
Yeah, so it doesn't take a ton, in other words.
Well, up to an extent.
Right.
Yeah, you can improve with short, but then once you start to stagnate,
exactly.
volume or
gotta
intensity,
find a new
or both.
stimulus. Yep. Got to increase something. Got to change something.
Yeah.
So the specific adaptations that come with a solid 60 minutes of riding at 65%, and that's something that can't be underplayed too. We're not talking about going out on a nice spring day and noodling along for the better part of an hour at an intensity that's barely making you breathe through your mouth. This constitutes a sufficient workload for most people. 65 minutes of steady effort for an entire hour is a reasonably tall order for most riders, especially if you're carrying any fatigue into it.
Especially if you're new to indoor training.
Yes.
Because,
yes, that too.
And this is huge for, I think, all cyclists. You come inside and there's such a big bang for your buck for not stop pedaling the whole time.
Yes.
That the amount of fatigue that your muscle fibers get is so much more than that same time outside.
Mm-hmm.
You'd have to do probably, the rule of thumb is like 50%
It's
more.
incomparable. Yeah. I mean, it's a pretty different margin.
Mm-hmm.
And then here's a couple things that you get if you get on the bike that you don't get if you decide to skip pedit, for example. Lymph removal. So the waste products, the stuff that is a product of the repair and nutrient delivery in addition, these are things that, I mean, that lymph removal doesn't take place unless the muscles are actually pumping, right? Contracting and relaxing. And then the nutrient delivery, the circulation via the bloodstream is enhanced when you get on the bike and actually do a little bit of work. So the restoration is actually a big concern, but that is fatigue dependent. So if you recognize that pedit leaves you flat and you're doing it just because it's on your training plan, you have to stop doing that. You have to recognize that I'm tired from yesterday's workout, Tuesday workout, and I have a hard workout on Thursday. So if I'm on the bike and I'm already dragging, this is probably not the right call.
Yeah.
So do recognize that this is low intensity work, but it might not be low enough to constitute restoration if you're really tired.
If there's one thing that you'll learn as a cyclist, amongst all the other things that you have a chance to learn, there's one thing that you probably will learn if you're training and going through this process is how to listen and understand. Listen to your body and understand it.
It's always hard.
It's hard.
Because it's like sometimes you push through it and you get like a whole new level of fitness. You thought like you just weren't HTFUing enough.
Yes, yeah.
And then sometimes you push through it and you get sick, and it's very... It's very that's the if anyone knew how to do that exactly right, they would be super fit. That's the balance.
It's a constant learning process, and there's always a certain amount of guesswork going on.
Totally.
It's just the way it is.
Yeah.
And then not to just drag this out and out and out, but there was a lot of discussion on the forum, and there's a lot of little subtopics I want to address within this overarching theme. This is an opportunity to do early morning endurance work too, to actually do some fasted rides, of which there are legitimate endurance benefits and low cost too. I mean, this is easy work, so why not do it in a fasted state and garner a little extra benefit? These are great rides for doing that. 65% is an ideal place to work.
And they don't take the amount of mental energy that other rides take. So in the morning, I find those rides take more mental energy, especially if I haven't eaten. But it's doable if it's a 60-minute.
And you eat right after. So you're just postponing your meal slightly. It's not a big deal.
And the benefits of a fasted ride are not just fat loss. People assume that's just the case, right?
There's a number of them. So not only are you burning fat while you're doing it, but you're also teaching your body how to metabolize fat. And anything, as we've seen or we know, over about 75 seconds of effort becomes predominantly aerobic in nature. So our aerobic engines are quite important. Carbohydrate sparing, so when you actually need the carbohydrate, you're not using it on these lower intensity affairs or efforts. And then endothelial function, the inside of your blood vessels, just how, there are all sorts of effects from fasted riding that also go with endurance training in general. And then bike fit opportunities. If there's one time where I notice just how poorly positioned I am on my bike, it's when there's low tension on my legs, when I'm actually carrying more of my weight, relatively more of my weight on my undercarriage and my elbows or hands, depending on what type of bike I'm riding. These low intensity rides, low pressure on the muscles, are a great time to suss out fit issues. Also a great time to work on your time trial position, for instance.
I was going to say it's almost impossible to ride a TT bike for the really light stuff, because you're not pushing yourself up as much and everything gets heavier.
It depends, right? I mean, if you have a really aggressive 40K position,
Yeah,
if
you're an Ironman triathlete,
matters
you
your
be on
style.
that bike for 4, 5, 6 hours, you should probably know what it feels like to ride at lower
intensity for that long. Great.
And then connective tissue integrity. This is a great way to strengthen connective tissue, which doesn't respond the same way muscle tissue does. It takes much longer. It just doesn't get the amount of blood flow, so it takes a little more delicate work. And then muscle priming. So this kind of goes hand in hand with the topic we're going to talk about in a minute, but a day off the bike leaves so many people sluggish and lethargic for their next workout. Not to mention there's a potential decline in endorphins, or natural painkillers that we'll touch on in a little while. So yet another reason. And yeah, I think that about covers it. Probably pretty sufficient.
Is that it?
If that's not enough reason to get you on the bike for a 1-hour pedit ride in between your other high intensity rides, I don't know what will be.
Or 90-minute Baxter.
Yeah, there we are.
Yes, absolutely. So if pedit's not sufficient enough strain or stress,
that's what you see.
We have alternatives.
If you follow me on Strava, Nate Pearson,
it's like
that's what you see me do a lot, because I can only do so much intensity.
I do Coliseum just because I don't want to do. Just because I don't want to do Baxter. It's only mildly harder. I feel like you own that workout.
Coliseum is harder than Baxter by a lot.
No, not by a lot.
I mean, it's slightly. It's the same exact workout, but some of the lows are just not as low.
It's maybe harder for you, but clearly not for Coach Chad over here.
Not for Coach Chad.
It's plenty hard for Coach Chad. Everything's hard for me right now.
Can I clarify one thing? It's not a recovery workout.
Yeah,
I feel like a lot of people view it because it's lower and it's simpler. They view it as a recovery.
Can't drive that home enough. This is not intended for recovery. If you need recovery, this is not the workout you select.
So Recess, Dan's, Taku -1. Those are like good ones that I see people usually do for recovery.
Yeah, and the Recess workouts, it's a 60-minute workout, but there's the workout instructions within that workout say, if you're tired, now cut it off. I mean, you can make that a 20-minute workout and actually encourage you within that instructional text to do exactly that. Recognize when this recovery ride is not feeling like recovery anymore and get off the bike.
The one thing I want to say too about fasted rides are I've done them before, but personally I find the next day require more recovery. It's added stimulus. So
we're going to talk about that too. Not in this question, as another question.
But so personally, I don't do it because I don't want it to. The benefits of doing that, I'd rather have the next day kill my interval workout.
Agreed.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's a strong case for not doing fasted rides.
Dave's question.
Okay.
He says, having listened to each and every one of the podcasts during commutes to and from work, I feel like I've gotten to know the three of you pretty well. However, I would love to hear a little more about what your typical work week consists of, aside from putting on a 5-star podcast, thank you very much, and personal training time, of course. A little more insight into what types of things the three of you do at Trainer Road would be great to hear. Thanks again for motivating and inspiring us all to become faster cyclists. So I hope that with through us answering this question, what we can get across is perhaps a bit of more personal connection with us, but really the main goal with this is showing how we fit in our training around all the different things that we do, or so you can understand kind of the load that we go through. Nate, do you want to start this off and kind of, no, he's shaking his head. Do you want me to start off?
Go ahead.
Okay, I'll start off. So basically, the podcast is a big focus of mine here at Trainer Road, but then there are a lot of other marketing responsibilities that fall generally within a marketing manager's sort of role. So I won't bore you with the depths of those, but basically very focused on marketing tasks. And we aren't a huge team, so as a result, a lot of things ended up getting brought up really quickly, and then we have to act on them. So my work week isn't very predictable, is what I'm getting at in some respects, right? Like it's not like every day I just know that 5 o'clock I'm out. It's not like that sort of thing.
Training schedule has to be pretty flexible. Is that where you're going with this?
Yeah, exactly, and that's and that's a complexity that we'll get to in a bit. But I don't really know if any of us have like a super predictable. I don't know if you would say that across the board.
I always wing it, and it's usually to my detriment. It's nothing I recommend. And if I were being coached, I certainly wouldn't coach myself this way.
Yeah,
I can control mine more. I've noticed actually back in the day when I did more development work and I was on key like critical path things for the product, I would oftentimes skip workouts, and then it's really hard to increase. But now that I'm more taken out of that, more management stuff, I can really make sure my calendar from like 3:30 on, I have nothing, so I can do a ride. And then also the thing that my kids go to gymnastics or swimming, and I have to pick them up at 7. So really I have between 4 and 7 to do a ride and eat. And that is amazing. That's the best thing ever. Yeah.
Great.
That's like my time, and I can do a workout. So I can be very consistent with that.
Yeah.
Something that I've found with ours is I have a regrettably long commute, which will probably end up changing at some point. And that is a big barrier to me getting my training in a lot of the time, because basically I look at it and if I train and like I hustle to get all my work done so then I can train at 3:30 or 4 o'clock, and then I train through that, then I'm stuck in traffic for quite a long time. Yeah. And then I get home to my family pretty late. So it's a complex thing. I feel like if I could cut down my commute time, then I could actually justify more training time, get more time with the family, everything
For sure.
else,
And what most people do though is they wake up earlier, but you have to sacrifice sleep for that, which is tough. Yeah. But you can also kind of miss the commute times.
And where that gets complex for me is that I take my son to school every morning. His school is really close to our work here. So before that was possible, but now it's really not, right? You have to get him ready, get him to school, that sort of thing. Or you
wake up at like 3 a.m.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Or you're up at 3 anyway.
That's what Chad does.
Yeah.
Literally.
We're not joking.
I'm trying to weave. So my responsibilities here, basically, I spend a lot of time on education, a lot of time on the workout catalog. And back to education, that's either my education or via the podcast, trying to educate others. And then the workout catalog, I can get lost in that thing for hours, no problem. There's just an unending amount of work to be done in there, but it's all stuff that I find interesting. So it's easy for me to spend time doing that. Occasional special projects. And then with training, it's super easy at a company like this. And with my work schedule being flexible, I can, if I want to, do a workout prior to work, come in a little bit later, and then tack work time onto the end of it. Or more often, I just go home and I've got an entire setup here at the office and an entire setup at home. So it's super easy.
Yeah. We're to make
it happen.
We're different than lots of companies.
Spoiled. Very
we have
spoiled, yeah.
Spoiled.
Trainers in our office with fans, a shower, towel service. And then I want people to use Trainer Road, and I want people to work out. Yeah. I also want people to get the work done, and people could just do both. Like you don't need to. We're not a bottom in seats company where like I'm going to time how much I'm paying you to sit in this chair. Yeah. No, I'm paying you to get results, not anything else. So
we're very spoiled.
And in order, especially us, you got to use the product. Product managers got to use the product. And we have a workout room. We have a very nice gym. And we have another room now that's dedicated just to indoor bike training. So if you don't have a private office, you put a bike in there, ride. That all helps everything.
At the same time, if I could cover the other side of this perspective, a lot of bike companies, for example, they'll be like, peace out, we're gone for 2 hours at lunch.
Yeah, right. Lunch race.
And they're just kind of like gone. And that's not us, right? Yeah. And once again, like the end goal is we're working for results. For those that don't know, we're a bootstrapped company. We work really hard for the growth and progress that we have, and we're appreciative for all of you guys for doing that sort of thing. But it basically just means that we really have to deliver results because we
have to be efficient.
Yeah.
I was just at it's called SaaStr, a conference, and all these people, they get to X dollars in revenue, but their funding was like 2 times more than the revenue goal. Mm-hmm. So they got to waste. Yeah. I wouldn't say waste, but in SaaS, it's SaaS is software as a service, so subscription-based software.
Yep.
because the lifetime value is probably too deep for everybody, but
Yeah.
the lifetime value goes out very far. They spend a whole bunch of extra money.
Yeah.
And I'm just sitting there like, wow, if we could spend $2 to make $1,
Yeah.
that would be so easy.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
Like that's not the case for us. Or sometimes they spend $3 to make $1
Right.
in that year, and then they plan to get it back many years later. But
Yeah. So I usually train, once again, 3:30 is the same time when that's when I have my training scheduled every day. That lately has been rarely satisfied as far as like me actually hitting that goal. But that's just how it works. And the one thing that I've thought of with this is that something is better than nothing. So even on days when, once again, I can't do a whole lot, I'll look at the workout that I have scheduled, and then I'll look at the variations of that workout, like the -4, minus something like that. And if I have 30 minutes, 45 minutes, something like that, I still try to get something done.
What I see the most successful people is when they can control a certain aspect of their schedule.
Mm-hmm.
Like Brandon, he's amazing. He can get up early.
Mm-hmm.
He's a 5 watt per kilo rider here, and he can do a workout in the morning. And if he knows he doesn't have time to do it in the evening, it will be his main workout. But if not, it'll be one of 2 workouts.
Yes.
And then he's very efficient during the day. And then 3:34, he stops and does another workout after that.
Yep.
And it's like we just talked about, it's consistency. So if you can control one aspect of your schedule and then hit it all the time without burning yourself out, because it's so tempting to do. Chad, you naturally wake up early, but it's so tempting to do what you do, cut out sleep for it.
Yeah.
And if you that's like cutting out recovery.
Yeah.
After a while, it just gets down. And down
I don't.
and down.
I don't perform well with that.
I'm
I
horrible.
have data in my personal experience that says that doesn't work for me.
Yeah.
I sleep more than anyone.
Yeah.
You probably know.
Oh yeah. Nate sleeps a ton. The thing that I'm getting at with this though is it is better to do your workout earlier in the day, because then you put it basically it's prioritization, right? And if you have the chance to be able to prioritize your workout, that's awesome, because then when the day stretches long, things go haywire. You've got it done. But it's easier said than done.
The idea is, and same with saving, it's called pay yourself first.
Mm-hmm.
Where if you do the thing that benefits you first, when anything else changes, like you happen to, like you change your schedule around and the other stuff still get done. But if you don't save your money for your like retirement first, or you don't do your workout first, those things seem to get like pushed off. But if you wake up into your workout, it's just done. That makes weekends, doing your workout early in the morning is the best.
Yeah.
I keep getting this thing where I do it like at 11. It's horrible. It
It's
takes like
super hard.
the whole day's gone.
Yeah.
Yep.
I gotta fix that. I'm going to.
Yeah, it always looms too largely. I don't like it hanging over my head all day or even all morning.
Let's get into Yako's question. He says, could you guys talk through motor pacing? How, when, why, etc.? I'd just like to hear some great tips, and thank you. So this is, I'll kind of outline what it is first, and then we can go into all the different benefits that we see come from it. First things first, I want to say this is something that you would want to start using closer to your event of choice,
It's
in
pretty
my
specialized
opinion.
training.
Yeah, so this is getting toward the specialty phase. But so this is something where you basically follow very closely. You follow another, it's a scooter or a motorcycle.
Motorized vehicle of some sort, yeah.
Some cases a car. Usually it's easier to do something on a very low-powered scooter, and we'll get into why in just a little bit with that. But you basically, you ride behind that, you draft, and then the pace of that vehicle defines your pace. Mm-hmm. And you can coach them in terms of how you want them to actually pace things. Mm-hmm. So the point behind this, I guess there are a bunch of different points, but it's really getting you up to speed for a race day sort of a thing is really what they're going for. Right?
Yeah. So the real benefit, or perhaps the primary benefit of motor pacing, is that it's high power and high speed, but it's done with high cadence, which makes it low torque. So we're not looking at the same level of muscle stress to maintain those high levels of power, which if you're going to ride for literally hours at a pace like this, in some cases, depending on the type of athlete you are, it can't be high torque. You can't just be cranking on those fast twitch fibers and expect them to last for hours on hours, or even an hour.
Right. Yeah. I haven't seen many people working on it like that. It always seems like it's associated in some degree with some sort of speed work with the legs.
It really is speed endurance. That's quite simply what it is. Mm-hmm. And then, as we mentioned, it's really specialized. So I don't see a heck of a lot of benefit. I mean, speed endurance always has its place, but I don't know that I would recommend to riders I coach to get out and do motor pacing early in the training season.
Yeah,
it would make more sense to reserve it for closer to your actual competitive season. But what it offers is a familiarization of riding at high speeds. It's something you can't really get unless you're in a really large, fast-moving group. And when do you have opportunities for that except in a race? So this is good race prep so that that's not foreign territory. It's really useful on rolling courses too, when you have to change your speed and your effort to maintain a steady speed.
Yeah.
So courses that roll, there's obviously a vast difference between how much output or how hard you're working on a downhill versus a slide uphill.
Totally.
And learning to modulate your effort and your power so that you maintain a steady speed is something that you can attain via motor pacing.
Yeah, so this is where like coaching on the motor pacing matters in terms of what you're telling the other person to do.
Yep.
So, and this is why I advocate also for a low powered scooter. And the reason for that is because a low powered scooter will be affected more by hills. And you yourself being a cyclist are a very low powered scooter, relatively speaking. So you get into a situation where basically you may have a set of rollers, for example, and you're going to motor pace through that. And you might ask that person, peg it at 27 miles an hour, let's say, and don't let that budge. And that may be what you're working on. What that's going to mean is that your power is going to fluctuate wildly over those rollers because you're trying to hold 27. However, you may have a goal instead of 27 miles an hour. You may say, try to keep the effort level on the engine very consistent, right? And you can feel when you're burying that throttle a little bit more, making it work harder. So in those situations, you're basically trying to make them mimic what you are doing on the bike, but keep a consistent power, basically as consistent as one can be. And once again, the goal, kind of speed work with all of this, combining that really high speed sort of stuff.
And what I think some people don't recognize is that the neuromuscular function, how your muscles fire, the recruitment patterns, all these things, how your legs work at different speeds is rather different. I mean, pedaling along steadily at 24 miles an hour versus 26 versus 28 versus 30, these are all different forms of stress on your muscles. And if you're not accustomed to this sort of stuff, that different form of stress in a race scenario isn't going to serve you well.
This is where we talk about inertia and adjusting things like, using gears that you might use in a race, that sort of stuff. You're still, the watts are the watts for sure, but this is like an icing on the cake to make sure that you're even more prepared for race day.
Yeah. And some of the further benefits of these is that it helps you refine your reflexes. You have to get really good at reacting very quickly, and it removes control. It takes the speed of how fast you're riding out of your hands. You simply have to react to it and make it happen. So, which is very much akin to racing.
For the inertia thing too, if you have a smart trainer, if you want to experience this, go in erg mode and be in your biggest gear and do an interval, then be in your smallest gear. And it will feel totally different.
Very different exercise.
And there's Jonathan and I have debated on which kind of gear. I think it's outside your mostly high inertia rider, so I do a bigger gear, especially at these higher speeds. I think that's one of the benefits of getting a trainer with a big flywheel, because you get the higher inertia. But Jonathan does a lot of slower mountain bike grinds and stuff, so he does a lot of lower inertia stuff. On the rollers, you can't do it.
Yeah, the rollers that I have, the Elite Quick Motions, they feel lower inertia for sure than like
rollers are way lower inertia. You get it like to a test too is how long does it take to spin down after you stop pedaling? And with rollers, it's about a half second.
I think mine might be a second and a half.
Where the Cyclops hammer that Chad and I use, it's like 2 minutes.
It's forever.
It's a long time.
It's crazy. So I like that feel.
Yeah, and it really depends on what you're doing for race day, that sort of stuff. And when we're talking about motor pacing, though, one thing I want to jump into, like you said, reactions and being able. So first of all, the group never responds how you. Very rarely is the group behaving how you wish they would behave in terms of shoot, they're picking up the pace right now. I don't need that right now. Or this pace is going so fast, I'm spinning out, but the group is able to carry it. And that, those sort of things are really tough. The other thing, though, in terms of reactions that I find is crosswinds. That, when you're motor pacing behind somebody like this.
Learning how to manage a crosswind is motor pacing is a great place to learn how to manage a crosswind.
Absolutely.
Very good.
Yeah, and I feel like the reason for that is because they're such a constant. They're able to be so constant that you are able to basically, if the scooter's going here, it doesn't have to move or sway or anything else like that. It's just steady. So then at that point, you can really refine that position and make sure you're reacting to changes in wind. It really just sharpens the blade, so to speak.
What I find especially useful is that it really drives home the importance of drafting. Because there are situations where if you lose that wheel, that's it. You're not getting back. You get tailed off the back of a fast-moving field because you don't know how to draft effectively. That is can very well be your race. And if it's not your race and you have to work to get back in touch with that group, that's probably your race. I mean, these things come at pretty heavy consequences.
Can I talk about that for a second? And this is a pro triathlete. She told me about this way back in, I think, 2007 when I was starting. And this is a great tip.
Making me nervous of the pro triathlete telling you about drafting. So.
No, she's awesome. She's a
no. I'm saying that they can't draft legally. You know.
She was in draft legal.
There we go. Okay, good, cool.
And then so then she was moving over to.
Wasn't implying skill at all.
Yeah, Kat Baker, amazing. You think when you start, you think, okay, I'm drafting. I'm right behind the person. It's not. You always feel the draft, and then you kind of too as you're riding. You move around a little bit. You try your head a little bit higher and lower.
Yep. Find the pocket.
Exactly. You find that it's always a feel thing. And that opened my mind when I first rode. And sometimes you're behind someone and you put your head down and you can totally feel it when you're motor pacing and there's no difference. So I'm like, well, why get tired?
Yeah.
But other times you put your head down a little bit and you're like, whoa, this is amazing.
It just got a lot easier.
Yep. And then that's worth the being extra tired. And a lot of times, a whole bunch of times it's offset. That video that I was traveling last week, we're still going to get up of the race. You see me on the side of the group a lot, especially on this one straightaway. But then if you look at my power, I'm doing like 80 watts, 100 watts, right? Yep. But I'm not directly behind someone. And you would think, Nate, why aren't you in the group? You're not drafting. But if you look at my power, I'm actually getting the best draft of anybody.
Yeah, right.
And everyone else next to me is pedaling.
So something to add to this about drafting, you can follow, so the closer you follow somebody, and on some riders, like for example, if I'm behind you, I'm pretty well within your draft, even when I have a pretty big gap, right? So
no matter what.
Tall rider, I'm able, that pocket of air is a little bit bigger. But when it's somebody that's smaller, then you really have to make sure that you're splitting all hairs.
Evil people.
And that's one thing that motor pacing will teach you if you have a really nice motor pacing setup, because you'll have a roller on the back of your scooter. And if you have that sort of a thing,
who has that?
Yeah.
And if you do, it doesn't just save you. I've hit a roller before and it's terrifying.
Yeah.
It's unless that thing's already spinning at the speed you're spinning at, it's still going to jolt.
It acts like a brake.
It's a little terrifying.
Until it speeds up.
It's a lot terrifying.
But the thing about it is it basically, that gives you some sort of encouragement or security that you can get closer to that thing than you may think you can. And I've noticed that when I first start riding in the beginning of the season with a group, I have a few inches that I end up closing up very quickly just with comfort, right? And those few inches that you dangle off that wheel, I'm not saying you have to be touching the wheel in front of you, but what I am saying is that the further you get back, and I'm talking even a matter of inches, there is a difference.
There is a difference, but it's like it's an exponential curve. So the extra 3 or 4 inches, maybe you get a 1 or 2% benefit.
Yeah.
Where if you get in that
2 or 3 feet,
then you've got 90% of it right there.
Yep. But I've had moments where I swear if I was just a few inches back, I would have been tailed off. It really was just like on the line of blowing up. Yeah. And I had to just be so diligent on staying right there because I was close to popping.
And to the point of the motor pacing, it's the faster it's going, the closer you have to be to get a. Totally. I think the room for error is smaller. I think that's kind of the point of this.
So let's also talk about some of the actual drills you can do with if you are going to go out and do some motor pacing. Here's some fun and very useful learning opportunities. One of them is sprinting from high speeds. It's pretty hard to negotiate or construct a really high-speed sprint with just a couple buddies because they have to bury themselves to get you up to a decent lead-out speed. And how many times are you going to be able to do that? Whereas with motor pacing, if you're on the wheel of a scooter, you can go again and again and again and again. And basically, you're just doing a 6-8 second sprint, and you can reset up for another one of those and probably get in as many of those as you want to.
Yeah. One tip, though, you go slight downhill into a flat, then you can start it at 30 miles per hour and then sprint.
Yeah, so that would be an alternative.
The interesting thing about the coming around, though, I think is slightly different in that case because you have something going fast. You have no draft. Yeah. You can work on building up that sprinter's gap, so to speak, that you see in all match races where you have that little bit of gap. You ride into that draft and then you just deviate at the right moment.
Yeah,
makes a difference.
So a couple of the drills that I used to do, and I don't have some vast background in motor pacing. I mean, I've done a few sessions, so I have a decent handle on it, but I did recognize how valuable it could be if I had more access to it. The problem was it was a friend of a friend, so getting the scooter wasn't an easy get. But one of the things we would do is come arounds. And we would set the speed. Sometimes it was 26, 28, all the way up to, I think, 30 miles per hour, where you sit in the draft, and then you have to go out into the wind, get around the scooter, and then settle back into the draft.
Do a full circle around the scooter?
Yeah, which is basically an over-under, depending on how long it takes you. And how high intensity that over-under goes depends on how fast the scooter is going. But what that really drives home, the major benefit of that is learning how to fold back into the draft without scrubbing off a ton of speed. And the importance of finding that wheel right away when you're in a highly fatigued state.
That's huge.
Yeah.
That's huge in a pace line. I find that's the most tiring time of a pace line because I usually shut it down too early as you're floating back.
That's so costly.
So the difference in speed is too big.
Yes.
And then I'm sprinting to get back on.
Yeah. Everyone thinks that the hardest part of being in a pace line is when you're on the front. But I feel like the hardest part is reattaching to the back because
undoubtedly, especially if you've done too much work, if you've done a hero pull, or if you're just the weakest guy in it, or it's toward the end of it and you're fading,
or you do what I do when you flip your elbow, you're like, that's it, I'm done.
Just turn it
you
on.
really have 15 more seconds.
Yep.
So to get back in of work.
Yes.
And if you stop pedaling, or that's probably the biggest takeaway for people is when you flick your elbow to have someone else come through and you're going to go on, you're not done yet. Your pull's not over.
Still not done.
It's the hardest part. So don't think that it is, and save a little for that.
No, for real.
One thing that I like to, so let's say the complexity road surface or road something doesn't allow for you to do the full circle around that scooter, is you can just drift out into the wind.
Yeah, so I kind of got a little ahead. What you would start with is in and outs, which we call them in indoor training parlance is over-unders. So same idea, but rather than come around the scooter, you just get out to the side so you're in the wind for as long as, maybe you're supposed to be out there for 30 seconds, 10 seconds, or whatever. Maybe there's a watt target, whatever, and then you fold back in. So same idea, but a lot easier to manage. And then probably one of the most common drills is simply speed endurance. So maybe you sit on the scooter's wheel. I think Bernardino or somebody used to do it for like 2 hours at a stretch. But consider the type of racing he does. I mean,
Totally.
It's commonplace.
So I think it's fair to say with this that this can be extremely dangerous. We also
Absolutely.
And extremely hard to like set up.
Totally. We accept no responsibility. There's our check. But the thing about
I'll say this, don't do it.
Yeah, exactly. But the thing about this is it can be accessible with just having a faster rider that you ride with.
It can.
For example, Keegan Swenson, friend of the podcast, which, by the way, good luck in Greece. He's racing his first stage race of the year right now. UCI stage race, chasing some points. Keegan Swenson and Ryan Standish, another pro mountain biker, Australia or Australian and American. Standish is like a diesel, like big guy, can put out some serious wattage, and was working at times last year on like more steady state TT sort of power. And Keegan was like, this is perfect. I have motor pacing sessions. I'm going to ride behind you, and then we're just going to do motor pacing stuff while you work on that time trial, the training. So it's very rare that you will have that situation where those two things combine, but it's possible. And it's a benefit if you have faster riders in your region. You might ask them, hey, if you're ever doing a steady state workout, do you mind if I just try to hold your wheel? And that can turn into something very akin to
I just think
workout.
It is dangerous. I can't deny that, but it is a really good complement to indoor training. I mean, this is one way to get out there and work on skills, especially at high speeds.
Yeah, I think I stepped out for a second, but sorry if you guys said this, but for me, the benefit is getting comfortable at going 30, 35 miles per hour.
We did say that.
Next
and
people.
Yes, that's
the
a big deal.
To me, all the other things you can kind of get like over-unders and stuff, and drafty you can get in packs, but it's hard to be able to, if you can sit at 30, 35 miles per hour for an hour, then you go race at 25, it feels so slow. And everything. It's just like your motocross background.
Yeah.
Like mountain biking seems slow to you because you did everything at 4 times the speed.
My speed threshold is just so high.
Yeah.
Right?
So that's huge.
Scroll back up in the doc, look what I highlighted. That's exactly that. So familiarization at high speeds, it's really hard to attain otherwise. Outside of a race environment or a really fast Saturday group ride, drop ride, it's a tough thing to get.
Genuinely is. Amy's question, she says, hey coaches, I love the podcast and really appreciate you having Amber on to cover the female side of things recently. We like Amber. She's awesome. And then she says, I'm a newbie triathlete and I hear people using rest, recovery, taper week, those terms, all in a seemingly interchangeable fashion. Are they the same thing? And if not, what is unique about them? Please help. I don't want to sound like I don't know what I'm talking about.
Amy, you just reminded me, the soup, it's not Annie's, it's Amy's soup.
Oh, really?
the soup.
Yeah, the soup is
soup.
Amy's.
Oh, Amy's,
So,
not Amy's.
sorry.
Got it. Okay.
Rest, recovery, taper. What's the difference, Chad?
Okay. So they are not interchangeable. And they shouldn't be used interchangeably. Taper is typically after you've done a bunch of training and you're looking for restoration so that you can achieve a certain level of freshness so that you're sharp for race day. And in doing so, it's really about maintaining fitness. So you're going to trim your training load, but maintain intensity such that your body can recover. And certain very important things happen. So your hemoglobin content comes back up, your hematocrit content rises, your red blood cell content volume, or the size of those red blood cells, increases, muscle contractile properties improve, or come back to where they were. White blood cell count rises, which means your immunity rises. Potentially enhanced glycogen storage as a consequence of tapering. But in a nutshell, we're looking for a return to normal with your higher fitness. That's what the taper is about. So the taper is very time specific, and it's all about reaping the best performance you can on the most important day or days.
Important thing to recap on this one is when we're talking about what you're actually doing during a taper week, it's short in terms of duration perhaps, but it's race intensity.
Yeah, the workouts are short, the recoveries are long, but the intensity is exactly what you need it to be, or exactly what you expect it to be.
Not necessarily race intensity,
race day.
but high intensity.
Yeah.
Because if you're an Ironman athlete
Totally.
or doing Leadville, we're
Just
not going to put you
spinning
at
along.
a 6-hour pace.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
So now when we get into rest and recovery, these two ones I hear really used interchangeably.
Yeah, people
they
say
are-
rest week when it's recovery week.
Yep. So rest and recovery, before we even get to the difference between the two, I'd like it to be understood that rest and recovery should just be seen as adaptation. I think that when people call it a recovery week or a rest week, or they say I shortchanged my rest or recovery, or I'm taking my rest or recovery very seriously, they could just as well be could use the term adaptation. And I almost wish they would, so they would place the importance on it that it actually merits. Rest and recovery are adaptation. This is when your body changes. So if you don't do this, your body doesn't change. It's constantly behind the eight ball, so to speak.
So what is a rest week? Let's start with that one.
When you talk about a rest week, it's typically full rest. And that's probably a better term to describe it. It's less ambiguous. Often enough, pretty much every training plan I develop, there's always a rest day. It's typically Monday. Shifted around to where you need it to be, but that's one complete day of rest where you're doing nothing, ideally, giving your body a chance to basically do what we just talked about in the taper, is reset, restore.
It's a super cool feature on the calendar now in Trainer Road. When you put a plan on there, you can move those days if you always know that your recovery day lands on a different one, or if, life happens and you're midweek and you need to change that around, you just click and drag it to move around. Super handy.
Yep. And then typically it's just a single rest day a week, but in some cases there are extreme situations that merit more than one rest day. Like if you come off a big training camp, or like I went to Italy and did a big training block that was enormous, so I took several days off. I overdid it. Not the best
Several
example.
days.
Just a couple days.
So if you get to a point where you need more than a couple days,
He takes his rest seriously, is what he's
if
getting
you
at.
need more than a couple days off the bike, you actually require it.
Rest months.
You probably overdid it.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, so that was a mistake, a series of mistakes day after day. And then recovery is just a reduced training load. So we see recovery weeks. Like you might have a recovery workout within the week, or you have a recovery week at the end of a 3 or 4 or 5 week loading block. And all we do is reduce the intensity and reduce the overall training load. So we'll probably try to keep you, or people try to stay on the bike or run or swim as many times as they normally would, but they do it at a lower intensity level, probably completely omitting high intensity work for that period of time.
So remember, rest, thinking like you're resting, doing nothing.
Full rest, do nothing. I mean, and we're not talking about literally do nothing, although if you have that luxury, it'd probably be pretty beneficial. But we're talking about, no weight training, no yoga, no low intensity work on the bike. I mean, actual rest.
Yeah, I fall in this trap, and I see other people do too. Even some days I'll leave early. I'm so tired. I got to go home and rest. And my wife's like, "Sweet, you have a free afternoon to come with me to go to Home Depot and Bed Bath & Beyond and everything."
Yeah, it's really not restful.
Yeah, but on the recovery week too, you're like, "Oh, I can load my schedule up to do all these extra things," and you're kind of like, you have to live your life, and you can't just be like, "Oh, it is a recovery week, honey."
Yeah.
So I need to then sit on the couch all weekend long. But that's usually that's like the yard work week. Or like all the things you have to do, and then it becomes you come out of it and you're tired. So it's just a balance. You just have to think about that. I remember when I did my first Ironman, I had just met my wife, and they were laying pavers in the back with my father-in-law. This is before we were married, and we had to put in at our house the pavers. And I told him, it was like a week before, I'm not doing this. Like, he wanted me to help. I'm like, nope, I'm training so much for this Ironman. I am not laying pavers for like 3 days.
So bad.
The week of my race.
Yeah.
But it took a lot of courage for me to tell him that,
Sure.
because he's very much a guy, do the work yourself.
Yeah.
But he likes me still, I think, so that's good.
It worked out already. Let's go into Tim's question. It says, hey there, I've been using Trainer Road for over a year now. Dropped over 30 pounds and gained about 90 watts in the process. So I have you to thank for helping me get there.
That is huge.
That's awesome. Way to go, Tim.
I want to do that right now. Right? Can you imagine?
Right now. That'd be great. It says, I have a question regarding fasted rides during a recovery week, like you foreshadowed there for us, Chad. It says, will doing the prescribed recovery workouts fasted diminish the benefits of a recovery week? Currently finishing up week 5 as Sweet Spot Base Mid-Volume 2, and I'm looking forward to my upcoming recovery week. I typically do one fasted ride per week, always the endurance ride. So he says, thanks for reading my question. This really gets into this perfect segue from what you were speaking about, Nate, in terms of when you have your recovery week.
Yeah.
If you're either filling it or looking to split hairs and try to get advantages, tough time to do it.
Honestly, I have to say maybe. I can't take a hard line on this and say absolutely not or absolutely permissible. A recovery week is about recovery, though, so it's not about incurring any other forms of stress. And fasted rides are potentially stressful.
Yep.
If they're legitimately stressful in some manners. I mean, we're talking about if you do it straight out of bed and cortisol is elevated in the morning, then you hop on the bike and cortisol remains elevated, there is a potential for, if you're not ingesting some protein, proteolysis. I mean, actually losing muscle mass over the course of the ride, and then it can hamper recovery. So maybe you don't fuel as well as you need to during the rides or post rides. And this week is an opportunity for you to retop off your glycogen stores that never really get topped off over the course of training weeks. And you're doing these rides fasted. It's not to say you can't make up for that later in the day, but again, maybe. I can't say for sure good or bad. You do have to pay attention, obviously, to how you're feeling. It just, as long as it's still about recovery and you recognize that you're bringing a very fatigued body into this week, and anything that could be further stress on a body and prevent restoration is something to be concerned with. I
find that when I follow the plan, and I really do follow the plan on these recovery weeks, man, they are so hard at the beginning of the week. I've tried it, and I think the worry that people get too, I've had this where you think, oh, I'm going to get fat if I eat anything this week because my training volume is down. But really, too, on recovery weeks, the intensity is down, but if you look at the calorie burn, it's still pretty high. You still need
still
fuel.
Get away with eating quite a lot.
Yeah, exactly. And you need to. And I've made mistakes in the past, but where I get the biggest jump in FTP is when I fuel everything and I come in that next test, like I am so ready to work. I feel refreshed. My legs feel good. By the end of the week, I feel good.
Well, again, recovery week is adaptation, right? It's about adaptation. So if you're underfueling your body over the course of a recovery week, a body that's reeling from all the stress you've heaped on it in the preceding weeks, how do you expect it to recover?
See, I don't personally, I would advise people to not do fasted during the recovery week just because of that adaptation. And I want to get the biggest benefit I could of the previous 3 weeks. Yeah. Do that while you're doing your 3 weeks, if it can handle, and then just let's let the body come back. And let's say you do gain a little bit of fat, it's going to come right back on because you're going to be so prime to do this next set, and your intervals are going to be great. And you're going to be able to do a little bit more probably load.
That's pretty much my stance on this too, is to err on the side of caution and save those fasted rides for
But it could work.
Non-recovery weeks. But it could.
Yeah, there's probably someone sitting here typing, I got the biggest benefit. And
Yep, and maybe. So maybe you find that these recovery or these lower intensity rides are the exact time that you can get away with doing fasted riding, and you derive a benefit from it, and you emerge into that next week, that next loading week, ready to do it.
Or if you're really good at fasted rides, like you've already done a lot of them, I feel, and then it's not a big shock to the system. But if you've never done them and you're like, I'm going to do the whole week fasted.
It's good advice,
it's going to destroy you.
The two things I would add to this are the successful professional cyclists that I know don't skimp at all on recovery weeks. They are not looking to fast. In fact, they're taking in a lot of food, and they're taking in a lot of high-quality food.
Yep.
The other thing that I would add is during your recovery week, I don't think of what's going on that week as much as I think of what's going on next week. So to your point, Nate, that's what you should always be thinking of. You're not recovering. It's not as much that you're recovering I would say, like, a lot of people think like I'm just getting a break before I jump back in, but think about what's actually happening. Like Chad said, you're allowing your body to absorb the work, and sure, you're recovering from what you've done, but you're also laying the groundwork for what's to come ahead. And that's a really important perspective shift that people could have that would, at that point, it kind of makes you go, oh yeah, I definitely don't want to be splitting hairs and marginal gains and trying to run the line thin during the recovery week. I'm trying to prepare for even more training, because it is going to be more training. So at that point, it shifts your perspective on the recovery week to, this is my prep week. I don't want to, be slimming down or anything like that.
Typically, if you emerge from a recovery week and you don't feel ready to get after it again, look at these things. Did you do fasted rides? Did you stay on the bike even though you were just dragging, even toward the end of the week when you should start to be rebounding?
Yeah. So let's say you do have a 60-minute pedit on recovery week. Is it okay to end that early if it's a hard workout?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, that recovery week is probably the most flexible week in your training. That's when you give your body the longest leash.
Yeah, flexible downward. And not only is it is it okay, you should, right? Like if you're feeling, I've done that, if you feel awful, just end it.
Yeah, err on the side of caution, especially during recovery weeks, or that's what we're talking about here. But to your point earlier, when you start a recovery week, you're going to feel awful. So anything is going to be probably a little more taxing than it typically is. So I wouldn't be so quick to pull the plug on something that's an hour long. Maybe force yourself to get through it. But if the next day it's just as miserable, and the next day it's just as miserable, you got to recognize that trend.
I think I did it last time on like, it was either Wednesday or I think it was Thursday. Thursday, it was like really hard to do the workout, and I was like, 30 minutes in, let's stop this.
Yeah.
Totally.
Why go into the next week tired?
Yeah. And there are a lot of things that influence how quickly you rebound too. So just because the last time you had a recovery week following the same loading cycle, the same 3-week loading cycle, you bounced back from it and you were ready to go at the end of that week, well, this could be different. So many factors come into play that you may not have experienced that last time.
Let's go into Justin's question. He says, at the end of episode 195, that was the previous episode, you briefly answered a question from a live listener about difficulty getting back into quality workouts after a week off. It's all
you guys like you
well.
organized this.
I know, it's amazing, right? He says, can you go into more detail with this? I've found I respond best to consistent training load, and if uninterrupted, I can keep piling it on and reap the benefits. I assume he means within reason, because at some point, there's always a turn down. But he says, but travel and vacations stress me out because no matter how hard I try to keep the training load up with runs or hotel bikes when available, I always come home afterwards and spend the next week getting back to where I can complete workouts I was nailing before the trip. Is this loss of fitness and rebound even real? Or is it just a matter of me being out of the habit of working hard? Any suggestions on how to bounce back faster from this? And he says, many thanks for the great product. I've accomplished a lot because of it. And 5 stars given long ago on the podcast. Awesome. Cool.
There's actually support on both sides of that. So.
Yeah. So one thing that Chad's going to get into the physical stuff. I'm just going to touch on something that I've noticed with this on the psychological side of things. I feel like if you are spending, so first of all, he says, let me try to find this here. He says that it stresses him out to go on these sort of trips, right? And if you think about it with work trips or like going to Disneyland, that's insanely stressful, right? Like trips with family, that sort of stuff. It's a ton of stress. And many times you come back and you spent the whole time just wearing yourself down psychologically, so to speak, during these times because, oh no, I'm losing things.
And physically.
I'm losing things. And for sure. Yeah. We'll get to that soon. But I feel like there's, even though really we're going to talk about the physical side of things, there is a psychological side to this that you shouldn't ignore for sure. We'll kind of weave that back in later on. But when you get into, I guess, these sort of weeks off that may be unintentional or maybe just be out of your control, I guess it really gets into the question, Chad, of like, is it fully detraining or are you maintaining something? Is it rest?
Yeah, so Justin talks about hotel bikes and runs. So if you're just going through motions, there might be some maintenance aspect to it. But if you come off a week of high intensity training and then you go into a week of travel that includes getting on a life cycle in a gym, is that really high intensity quality? Are you actually touching up that system and maintaining the fitness you built? Because if not, if the stimulus is not enough, you will actually detrain a bit. And it might not be a lot, but when you come back and you try to get back on the bike to do a workout that you did 8 days prior and you can't quite muster it, there probably is a little bit of deconditioning taking place or has taken place.
Totally. I could see this happening. I mean, so step back and think once again on the psychological side of things. When I have had these sort of weeks off and I sit back and I start to get very panicky because I feel like I'm losing things, like even this week has been bad for me for training, right? I sit back and I just think, you know what? And I may be lying to myself, but I say, at the very least, I am dosing my body with a whole heck of a lot of not stress right now.
Well,
I make a conscious decision to, instead of stressing about what I'm missing, I try to think about what I can gain in terms of upstairs rather than losing it upstairs. Because I find that really does matter.
There's the possibility that you carried a lot of stress or a lot of fatigue into this vacation, thinking that it will be restful, and then you go and you push through it anyway. So it's a surprise to no one that you come back more fatigued. Mm-hmm. There's also the stress that we've talked about that goes on during the trip. So maybe you are doing your maintenance workouts, but you're also running yourself down in other ways. So even though those were light maintenance workouts, those coupled with the other stress you're encountering could leave you flat when you come back.
Totally.
So that's just a matter of fatigue. So that wouldn't be actual detraining necessarily, but it will impact the quality of those early workouts, early return workouts.
For office workers, like I think on vacations or business trips, you move so much more than not.
Yes.
If you have a more active job, nurse, firefighter, construction, then maybe vacation is less than you would normally move. But for us, it's incredibly more stressful.
Totally.
I obviously if you can do a 3-week load and then on your vacation actually make it rest or easy workouts, that's obviously beneficial, and I think everyone hopefully knows that. I find, so I'm going to the Mayo Clinic in 3 weeks. I've looked ahead. They have like spin branded bikes, which they have a high flywheel. That's good. I can put on power meter pedals, and I'm planning on doing either Pettit or Baxter every day.
Yeah.
Because I can't do I've tried it before. I find if I do a very high intensity workout on those trips, it just drains me too much with everything else you have to do.
Yeah.
So I want to do.
Exactly what I'm talking
I'm going to take it as a recovery week, but it's not going to probably even be a recovery week. It's probably just going to be a stressful week because all the movement, you know what I mean? Like the amount of stress on my body. So I'm hopefully just not losing fitness.
Well, let me also mention that there is so when you train, you put yourself in a sympathetic state, right? So you're revving up a system, the fight or flight system. And with that comes a release of catecholamines like norepinephrine, epinephrine, dopamine, an uptick in cortisol, and a release of endorphins, which are your body's natural form of morphine, basically. So your natural painkillers, and those can stay escalated for hours, up to a day. So if you think about working to a point where the endorphins are flowing, and you basically got the painkillers masking the state that your body is actually in, and then you get a couple days where the endorphins die down, and you start to feel the pain.
Yeah.
I mean, that may sound like a psychological impact, but that's seems pretty physiological to me.
Totally. Yeah.
So in general, I personally, you take a week off in your trip, you cannot expect to jump back in the same spot you were or jump ahead. Because in a training plan, sometimes I try to do the exact same workout that I did the previous weekend.
And it's tougher.
I just now, based on how stressful this last week was, I can't do it. I'm changing the workout in my head. I'm going back a step.
Yep.
Or a couple steps.
I've flirted with taper workouts. So coming back, just the day prior to a hard workout, do a taper version of that very workout. So I get a little bit of that stress, but nothing that completely wipes me out or psychs me out. And then I do have a better workout, and I have to attribute it to that in particular. So kind of an easing in period.
Yeah, I'm going to ease in today with Baxter, and then Saturday and Sunday last week I did, some people got mad at me because I called it LeConte, which I think it's
LeConte? I honestly
apparently if you're Southern, it's LeConte. I Google on YouTube and someone said you say it LeConte. I did that in Wright Peak, but this weekend, no way could I. Those workouts both almost, or LeConte almost broke me.
Stick to your guns, Nate. I like
yeah,
it.
exactly.
own it.
It's a really hard workout. You know that workout, Chad?
I do.
It's one of the hardest ones we have.
It's really hard.
It's brutal. It's the power steps, right?
It's like 3 by 20 at threshold with like over-unders.
Yeah.
Oh, with the sharp little short
Yeah,
over-unders.
exactly.
Yeah.
But the over, like you're going like way over.
Sharp little overs. Yeah.
Destroys you. But I could not do that this weekend, and I'm going to actually change it way up. And next week's, everything's out of the window because we have a 24-hour race next week. So I'm going to back it off a little bit. We wouldn't need to talk about it, but
yeah.
It's.
Do you think we can get through 2 more? Let's try it.
Probably.
Patty says, what should you do when your event has been postponed for a week?
Panic.
Just quit.
You've been tapering for a week or two in preparation for the event, only to have it pushed out by a week due to weather. Do you continue to taper? Schedule 1 or 2 intense sessions early in the extra week, or do you do something else entirely? So this is, once again, we're talking about the balance between physical and psychological, like panic, like the first reaction. That's totally everybody's first reaction. It's like, I had everything perfectly planned. I executed my plan to whatever degree of perfection that you deem you did, right? I'm to this point, and then you change the race on me. It gets like really frustrating, right?
Sure. Yeah. But
It's
by a
easy to
week,
get carried away.
you gotta relax. You're not going to lose any fitness over the course of that week, especially if you maintain your taper. So keep doing your taper workouts. There's no reason to do full version workouts, full on workouts that you were doing a couple weeks prior to your taper.
Yeah.
Because those are aimed at improving or increasing fitness, and you're not going to increase your fitness in a 7-day span.
No.
So just continue with your taper. It's a single extra week. All you're doing is you could actually benefit from it. You may not have been as fresh as you could have been, and this extra week will allow you to unearth just a bit more freshness while still topping it off with your taper workouts. So it's absolutely not the worst thing.
So I'm not as smart as you, but here's what I would do. Because you would know a week ahead of time that you can't do it.
Yeah.
And if I went to the taper, I would actually on that Saturday, Sunday, do a pretty good amount. Not like totally hard, but on that Saturday, Sunday, do a good amount of work and then re-taper the rest of the week, take Monday off.
I don't see anything wrong with that. It's just like that would be like having a race weekend and then doing a taper week and then having another race weekend.
Yeah.
Low priority race weekend.
But I wouldn't be doing like
I wouldn't do anything excessive.
a 5-hour, 100-mile intense ride.
So like when we were setting up for our 40K TT, if it had got bumped 1 week, I might have done a 40K TT simulation that weekend and then done a couple taper weekends the following week and then done my race.
Yeah,
exactly.
I could see that for sure. Okay, let's get into Matt's question. Final one. He says, "Hey, Trainer Road, 5 stars. Couldn't be happier with my improvements. I've gone from 292 to 328 FTP at 178 pounds.
That's over 4.
That's impressive.
That's very good.
Yep. He says, I recently had an issue halfway through Ainsley. That's 4 minutes times 8 repeats at 105% FTP.
Tough workout.
Yes. He says, I took 15 minutes to stop, diagnose, and fix the problem, then another 15 minutes to warm back up. With work calls, mechanicals, and interruptions like this, what is the value and or negative of finishing a workout after a 30-minute forced break, like in smack dab in the middle? You could equate this perhaps to your coffee stop if you take those. So,
or children, or
totally.
things happen.
I almost scrapped the remainder of the workout, but channeled my inner, and he says in quotes, "How bad do you want it?" and finished it. It was mentally difficult to get back going, but after the first interval and the second half of this workout, I felt good again. So this
sums it up.
This happens a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, like, first of all, if you aren't able to complete your workout with perfect precision, don't feel like you're alone. This is very common.
No, it's tough. It's psychologically difficult and it's uncomfortable to get back into it after you've sat around for a long time. But the training benefit's still there. You're not missing out on that. I mean, even if it were a VO2 max workout where we're trying to maintain a high level of oxygen uptake and then you have this long break where it falls and you're basically back to normal and then you got to dredge it all up again. So what? I mean, that might come in the case of that type of workout at a small decrement to or effect to the overall intended training benefit, but it's just nothing to lose any sleep over. And in the case of something like Ainsley, where you're working at slightly above threshold for long durations, those 4-minute breaks are often insufficient, but they're intended to be so. I mean, it's a progressed workout. Or a form of it probably is based on another workout, and then there are plus versions of it. But in any case, we'll take workouts like that and just trim the recovery so that you're basically folding one effort into the next with less and less recovery so that it's more of a continuous block sort of thing. But sometimes that's a really tall ask. Some people, you just can't do it on certain days. So to have a few extra minutes of recovery, and you could even do this on your own if you wanted to. You just notice you're a little flat today. You can get through the efforts, but man, that 4 minutes isn't leaving me in a place where I feel like I can do another. So you tack on a couple extra minutes. You're inadvertently doing that. You may have a higher quality second half of that workout as a result of it.
Totally. Yeah. Now, this is different if you're talking about taking a break in the middle of, we've talked about this before, but with certain workouts, for example, like you said, it might be higher intensity or we're really aiming at having you complete the work interval for the exact intended duration. We're assuming that this is happening like in the middle of a rest interval, you've taken your break or you're you're warming up
But
something
in
like
any
that.
case, you're still going to get most of the
Yes.
intended benefit of the workout. It's not going to derail the thing to the point where you might as well skip it.
Certainly better than stopping.
Absolutely. And yeah, it is uncomfortable to get back into it. The lactate shuttling needs to come back up to speed, your oxygen uptake. I mean, there are things that are going to be uncomfortable and you're going to have to work through them. But once you work through them, you're back on track. I mean, it's just like being on a group ride or a group fast ride and you get a flat tire. You got to stop. It takes 10, 15 minutes. Everyone cools down and then you get going again. It's uncomfortable, but you do it and everything's back on track.
How many times has somebody gotten a flat tire in a group and then you're actually kind of grateful it happened?
That's it. Yeah, exactly.
This happens too in our area, at least, where you do a long descent. You can do a 20-minute descent.
Totally.
And then I find you
Long descents.
Just be aware
Climb afterward.
that it's going to hurt at the very, it's going to feel different at the very beginning. And that's okay, but it will probably, if you push through it, it'll feel better once you do it. So just
comparison.
push through it at the beginning.
Yep. Yeah, that's how it works. So with that, let's take some live questions that have been submitted throughout this live podcast. They're going to be on Facebook and YouTube. And once again, you can join us usually every Thursday at 8 a.m. Pacific. And I guess it's probably best to say right now that we won't have a live podcast next week because we will be in 24-hour town in the middle of the Arizona desert at 24 hours in the Old Pueblo. So, however, we will try to get some sort of a recorded podcast up from there. No promises, but that's our intent. So we'll see how that goes. Okay, I've got YouTube. You got Facebook?
Yes, but there's not a lot on Facebook. So I looked. There's a lot on YouTube.
There's
so
a ton.
Ask
Jump on
them.
over. Yeah.
When somebody said, was that me in South Bay Whole Foods? Yes. Los Gatos South Bay Food or Whole Foods.
That's funny. Yeah.
Come say hi. We're not like celebrities, so you make our day when you say something to us. We're not like Tom Cruise. We're like, oh, don't talk to us. We're busy.
Yeah. Yeah. I've gotten messages from people that say that they didn't want to bother me or something. And I'm sorry. That's probably just my face, but you could have said hi.
Yeah.
So
We're not fancy. Just come talk to us.
totally. Yeah. All right. Somebody says, Brandon says, I'm able to raise my heart rate by about 10 beats per minute by just thinking about racing while I'm doing my training. I was curious if you had any suggestions on how to keep your heart rate down when you're nervous. I also notice in my breakaways in a race that my heart rate is very high compared to what it would be training at that same effort. How can I keep it down? Is it all mental? So
it's a natural sympathetic response. There's nothing you need to concern yourself with.
It's not bad.
It's going to happen, and it's not going to come at the detriment to your performance. It just won't.
Yeah, your end goal is performance. We got another question this week that I almost included, but I didn't. And it was somebody that was, we're including it now kind of, but it was somebody that was asking about the fact that like my heart rate is higher than all of my friends' heart rates. What can I do to drop that? And really the same thing here is your end goal is performance, right? So if your heart rate is higher, like that sort of a thing, in this case, it might be heightening your awareness. It might be enabling you in a better way actually to have a little bit more blood flowing through you. So
and it's pretty subjective too. I mean,
thing.
I've got a max heart rate, I think of like 170 at this point in my life. And you guys you're probably what, 190, 185. I mean,
I hit 197 at the last race.
There you go.
Yeah. Nate's a little hummingbird. But but it doesn't tie into performance. That's the thing. So Brandon, in this case, don't worry about it. Also, I would take that as a positive sign that in race scenarios and everything else that your body knows that it should prepare itself and it's getting more prepared. It's not a bad thing. So don't worry about it.
Juan asks, and you've covered this before, Chad, but your thoughts on late night workouts. I eat dinner immediately after. I go to bed 2 hours after eating dinner. I'm having a hard time achieving deep sleep, and my HRV is low in the morning.
Yeah. It winds you up. And then depending on how you fuel, you could have high levels of undesirable hormones, so cortisol in particular. But it's hard to. We do this all the time with our Tuesday night race series. I mean, we go out and you go hard for an hour, two, depending on how many races you do, and then you come home and you expect your system just to turn off, and you think, I'm good and tired, so it makes sense that it would. That's just not how it works. You're in an elevated sympathetic state.
Any tips to like?
Not really. Not that I've discovered. I mean,
I think what Amber said is getting that protein in immediately after to tell your body like it's time to recover.
Sure.
Like I would do a recovery shake after that to help you sleep, and I do melatonin, especially in that situation to try to like also combat the arousal that you have.
Sure.
I would say try to do things in your sleeping space to try to make it so that you can rev down a little bit easier.
Yeah.
So basically cut out light.
Cooling's a big issue for sure. I mean, if you get wound
cool.
up, especially on a spring or summer evening, you could be hot as can be, and sleeping in a hot state, it's pretty difficult.
Yeah. Try to not use screens thereafter, that sort of stuff. Really, you're just trying to drop yourself
the usual
down.
stuff for sure.
Yep.
See, I find
Breathing.
I with the screen things, I do the blue light filter. I don't know how much, where you make a night mode, but I find that sometimes I'll go to sleep, and if I'm ramped up mentally, I will sit in bed and think for like 3 hours.
Yeah. The distraction of watching
Yes, and
Family Guy.
you watch something for like 30 minutes.
I've seen so many episodes of that. It's noise in the background. It doesn't grab my attention, but it distracts it for sure.
It's probably everyone's like, don't do this, but I watch it in bed, and
Me too.
it'll help me go to sleep. Like 30 minutes of that, my mind like shuts off. I get tired.
That's what I'm describing.
I
That's
read
exactly
books.
what I'm talking about.
I like to read a book instead of like
It
something
requires
else.
take
too
my-
much attention for it.
Yeah, my brain just starts thinking about whatever I was thinking about, and I stop reading. And I'm
I
like
don't-
3 paragraphs in, I'm like, what just happened?
I don't read, so I should clarify. I save novels, that sort of stuff for in bed reading. I don't read anything that's like, for example, I'm always listening to business books, marketing books, that sort of stuff. I wouldn't listen to or read those sort of things because those really get my brain going, and I start thinking about.
It's still a little too
why-
much attention for me. Or I have to devote too much attention. I find myself reading paragraphs 2 or 3 times over rather than recognizing I'm tired and just going to sleep.
Teach their own. Then that's interesting. Yeah. You'll find what works best for
What
you.
kind of books do you read?
So yeah, I really like Daniel Suarez's books. Those are like tech thrillers that you might not think is a good thing to go to sleep to, but they're really, really good. So that's the sort of thing that I would read, something like that. Somebody also kind of tacking onto the heart rate thing. Somebody says, I'm wondering how much of my nervous heart rate is wasted, like heart rate due to anxiety that isn't helpful for cardiac activity. And the one thing I want to mention with this is that so depending on the activity you're doing, it's a positive thing. In fact, there was in Supercross racing, which if any of you have ever seen Supercross racing, it's very intense, like very loud. And then they have brands like Monster that sponsor things, and they have flames going everywhere. It's kind of ridiculous, but like it's very much like an arousing experience because it's loud, it's bright, it's really aggressive. And there actually were, so the Supercross racers, one of them was going into a situation, I'm not going to mention the name, but he was going into a situation where he was overtrained. And when he was going into the situation of being overtrained, they actually, one of the big indications that his trainer saw was the fact that like as he was getting ready to race and everything else, he was not experiencing a bump in heart rate anymore when he was sitting on the line, not even racing. It was just flat, right? So sure, you can probably calm yourself down more than you currently are when you race, but the point isn't to just be completely like you're sitting on the couch and like nothing's happening.
And that high heart rate isn't fatiguing you. It's not. It's not like your muscles are doing any work. Your heart's just thumping along, and it'll continue to do so, and it's not going to cost you any performance.
Totally. Yep.
Question for you, Chad. What's the best core strengthening exercise, bang for your buck exercise? I guess twice in a row exercise. That isn't a plank. I don't know why I say isn't a plank, but
That's a tough one.
Chad likes trunk over core, by the way.
A plank. Lately, I've been doing my planks. You've seen the Spider-Man push-ups where you do the push-up and you drag your knee up. Well, now that's how we dress up our planks. Amaret and I. We just get in a plank position and we have a time goal, 60 seconds, 90 seconds, 2 minutes. And over the course of it, rather than staring at the clock, just pull a knee to elbow and then reset into a plank, knee to elbow, which is it's more cycling specific, about as cycling specific as you can make a plank. It's good in terms of flexibility, but yeah, it is a plank. So
here Alan says, what about ab rollers? Do you
Like
those?
the
reel
roller
that you
that
go
you hold
out.
on
oh
to.
yeah,
Those are pretty good.
Those are
Those things are tough.
difficult for sure, and I'm sure that's going to strengthen the mid body, the midsection. So sure, yeah.
One thing that I see with ab rollers is a lot of people just roll out straight. And I mean, this is way easier
you can
said
get
than
crazy with
done.
those things.
But yeah, experiment. In fact, check out Nino Schurter's video. You can see how he actually uses one that actually has like pedals
Well, I have
for his
the-
hand.
Per hand, so you can go out to the side, you can go out at an angle, you can go
Yeah.
out overhead. So it's basically 2 mini ab rollers.
Yeah, and if you don't have that, you can use plastic plates on carpet. That can work very well too.
Yes, you can. Absolutely.
So kind of an easy way to do that. All right.
Oh, here John has a good question.
Of course he does.
Would you
Great.
say if there is there a minimum FTP that one would need before they can be competitive in a Cat 5 industrial park crit race? Or is that impossible to say? So like a minimum FTP as like so you want to do a Cat 5 race
That's too hard to put a number on, especially in Cat 5. Like that's the most variable
or
spot.
watt per kilo? I can say for sure, if you're 3 watts per kilo, you are absolutely there.
Yeah.
Like no question.
Yeah.
And if you're not, I mean, you have to ride differently. So you're not the guy driving the pace or making a break, which Cat 5 races typically don't happen, certainly don't stick. But you just ride more defensively. You'll find yourself tucked in more, riding more conservatively.
Yeah.
So I don't think there's any minimum. I think get out there, try a race. If you recognize that you are too weak to even hang on to the group, then you know you got some work to do.
Yeah, nobody knows too if you get like dropped or lapped, no one cares, and
Yeah.
two, no one notices because you're behind. Like I can't tell you how many races. I don't know who gets dropped. Nobody
Yeah.
knows.
No
Nobody
clue.
cares.
Yeah.
So that's a good point. You can be at probably 2 watts a kilo, and if it's not surgery, probably hanging a crit just fine.
Yeah.
If you're at 1 watt per kilo, that's probably too low. One's probably too low.
Yeah. Brad.
It
Although
is.
I've seen people out there, I mean, they get lapped
That's
in,
true.
in the early laps of the race, but they're still getting some race experience. They're still getting probably a harder workout than they might otherwise get.
Yeah, a lot of times you can jump in. So that doesn't mean you can't do it and
Jump
get
back
benefit.
on.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
You don't mix it up with the race at the pointy end of the race, but jump back
So
in.
you won't be an animator, but you can still.
Yeah, I think John's
make it
question
worth your time.
John's question too is about to be competitive.
Totally.
Competitive is a different word than
And it's especially hard. The reason I say it's
That can
especially
vary by
hard with
region
Cat
even.
5 is because it does vary by region. Like you go to NorCal and you go to a Cat 5 road race, it's a bunch of NICA or high school kids, and they'll tear your legs off and beat you with them when you go uphill. So, but then you go to a different spot where they don't have that, and it might be like a true beginner's field, right?
Yeah. No, I've shown up to some races in various parts of the country just as a weekend tag on to a trip and raced, and you get a wide cross section of abilities.
Here's a great example. In the 3-4 race that I did at the industrial park where it was like a 3-corner crit, I think my average power was 163 watts.
Wow.
Like almost nothing. And I got second in that race. To get second, I had to put a whole bunch of power out at the very end.
Yep.
But during the race, like, can you put out 163 for 40 minutes?
Yeah.
Most people can't.
Totally.
Right? And you're probably way better at drafting than I am just because I'm bigger.
You could be a 1.5 kilo rider, watts per kilo rider, and have an awesome sprint. So
Yeah, you could actually win.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So why not?
I just had a workout that had higher normalized power than the crits that I did, right?
Every workout I did over
common.
the weekend was way, even than the P1, or the, not P, but the 35 plus 1, 2, 3, 4 race.
Yeah.
I think my normalized power was 280, and that was actually lower, or 275. That was lower than the 4 race.
Right.
But then I did a 2 hours at like 290.
Yeah.
And I was like, man, like,
It doesn't mean that the race was easy, though. Race is still hard.
But I mean,
right?
it does make the race a lot easier. If you can do more than double the duration for the same normalized power, you can be a lot more competitive in a race.
Yep. Brad recommends that the Pedal Industries bag, it's a rain bag with backpack straps and 2 top zippers. And I'm looking at it, and it's basically our bag, but it has straps on there. So right there.
Oh yeah, looks nice.
That's
There's
pretty
a lot
sweet
of
one.
them.
Thanks for the recommendation. There's a ton of them. Okay. And there's a lot of questions here on YouTube. Let's see. Lots of talk about that heart rate thing. Hopefully that helped answer it to people. Seattle Cyclists asked, can you talk about training different energy systems and training specific to them? That's one where we'd like to prepare more on that sort of a thing, and we can deliver on that one for sure. We've recently covered, like, for example, like the decay of fitness of specific energy systems, that sort of stuff. But I'll put that on the list of something to cover on a future episode in more depth.
Excuse me. Crunchy Gears has a question about inertia and spin down. Like, should I be in a certain gear then when I do a spin down? Is that going to affect my inertia? But how smart trainers do it is we have a target like speed, and then it's above what the smart trainer needs. So we might ask you to spin up to 25 miles per hour. And as long as you're in the gear to do that, you're fine. And then what the smart trainer does is it measures the time it takes to go from like 20 miles per hour to maybe 10. And then it does an offset based on that. I try to figure out what the resistance is for that. So you could spin up to 30, and it's going to be the same as the padding they need is just between the 25 and the 20. And it's different for each trainer, but we have it marked in our software.
Yep.
So gearing doesn't matter as long as you spin up to the speed.
Yep. Awesome. Let's see. Somebody says, how many watts do you think you might lose if your saddle isn't right for you? That's such a tricky question to answer, and I don't think anybody actually has an answer to that. If you go to a bike fitter and they say that you're losing 5 watts because of your saddle being incorrect, I grow a little skeptical, honestly.
Yeah, me too.
So the point is, yes, you can become more efficient across the board, but with saddle and that sort of stuff, there are probably plenty of signs that it's the wrong saddle before, instead of just wattage difference.
YouTube has great questions. Good job, YouTube. Here's a question. Can Motorpacing help in criterium racing, especially with keeping momentum in corners?
Absolutely.
I'm going to say, though, contrarian, I would not do this with Motorpacing just because the grip level on a scooter is completely different than a bike.
That's a good point.
But so here's my experience with just doing these races.
But at 30 miles an hour.
it just matters how closely they take those ones.
As long as they keep it realistic, I guess would be the...
Yeah, I mean, you just want to have somebody driving that scooter who's got some experience racing a bike.
Watching those videos, I promise they'll be out sometime. But the Cat 4 taking a land park had a really close, like really tight turns. The 4 race, we're taking them at 15 miles per hour, and then another one exiting maybe at like 20. The 1, 2, 3, 4 race, especially in the breakaway, we're taking that first one at 22 miles per hour and taking the next one at 27.
Yeah.
And I find that it helps me cornering so much if I'm in a single line, no one to push me off my line. But if if everyone in front of me just takes the line, the fear goes away, and I just take that line.
Because you know that line is safe and
yeah, exactly.
sustainable.
The last 5 people took it. As long as I don't do some weird waiting thing, I can take it on the bike.
Right.
On a scooter, different grip levels. I wouldn't be for sure. Like, it could push you, and as long as the person doesn't go extend it, but I know for sure that I can do it in a crit if everyone
There are
else
probably
does it.
safer ways to do cornering drills than motor pacing. Yeah, I agree.
Somebody asked, this kind of latches onto the recovery side of things. How important is nutrition during a recovery week? I find myself eating ice cream and drinking more beer when I don't have training intensity. Does that hurt adaptation when resting and recovering? Chad, you're particularly adept at answering this one.
World's expert.
We know that alcohol isn't going to help, isn't going to further
Right.
recovery or enhance recovery, and really overt sources of simple sugar aren't either.
Right.
I mean, they stimulate inflammation. So there are. Especially when your body's already in kind of a precarious state, feeding it less than healthful foods is absolutely against what I'd recommend.
One thing I have found, and I want people to know that you are not the only sufferer of this, is that I am starving during recovery weeks.
Yeah, so eat a bunch, but I don't know that beer and ice cream are the way to go.
And I think that the reason that kind of, for sure, you're right. But the reason that I think that bends people's minds is because, well, I'm doing less work this week. Why am I still hungry, right? You expect to be less hungry because you're doing less work. But that's exactly it. Just like what you were talking about. Your adaptation takes work, and absorbing that takes work, right? So,
Darsky asks, "Hello guys, Coach Chad, give me some tips. I'm a 34-year-old and have a family of 2 kids. Busy life. I work full time, on my feet, and when I go to train my bike, my legs feel really sore. What can I do?"
That's
okay. This sounds like this is
me.
me.
I mean, it's
So
fatigue, and standing is fatiguing work.
A huge change in my training is, you've probably heard this before, but when I increase my carb intake, my legs aren't as sore. And when I don't have enough carb intake, especially during the previous ride, I just messed this up with right peak, where like the night before was a very low carb dinner. The morning I didn't do enough carbs. I did right peak, and then after the next day, I was sore for like 4 days because I got in that glycogen depleted state.
Yeah, I could see that being part of it, but I mean, someone who has to spend his time on his feet all day long, that's it's just taxing. I mean, it may not seem like it because it's such low intensity stuff, but I mean, just standing at my desk for an hour versus if I stand for a couple hours at the end of the day and then I go out to my car, and when I sit down, it's noticeable how much fatigue I accumulated just from standing at my desk. I assume this is probably even more active than that. So my advice would be find ways to sit, but that may not be.
You can't. You might be a plumber and you just can't.
Yeah, exactly.
Totally.
I would say though, try to increase your carb intake.
Give it a shot.
Remove some fat and do that, and
it helps.
See what happens.
Norco Cycling, he basically is asking like if I should do a training plan backwards because he's worried because he's planning on racing. He says 2 races a week and then still training is what he's planning for a certain period of time. So really what your question is really getting at is don't worry about doing the plan backwards, but we're really talking about maintaining the sort of fitness that you need if you're racing 2 times a week and then training.
I don't know if you're talking about like reverse periodization where they heap on the shorter high intensity work early and then they extend the duration as they move toward their race.
Yeah.
Fits really well with like long course triathlon and longer events.
Sure.
So there is a case for that. I'm not sure I understand.
I think that what he's getting at here is he's worried that if he adds too much intensity to or too much intensity toward his races that he won't be fresh. But we've advised on this a number of times. You can go back and listen on different episodes. Where basically, if you find yourself in a situation where you're racing regularly, you really want to go into maintenance mode. That's like the sort of taper weeks that you have at the end of a specialty plan.
Are your intensity?
Yep.
It's
exactly right. And you'll see like in the final weeks of a specialty plan, you'll see that it really accounts for that sort of a thing. And if it feels too intense, you cut out that intense workout and just do easy stuff.
A couple to 3 days of intensity a week is about all most bodies can handle, regardless of how advanced an athlete you are. A lot of the time, a couple is enough. You can even maintain with a single day a week. So if you're going to race, for instance, on Tuesday, then maybe do a workout on Thursday and then race again on the weekend.
Yeah,
I mean,
sure.
that could be your entire training schedule.
Another question from Greg. How would I adjust my workout when dealing with IT band issues?
Oh boy.
My personal experience with this is you got to fix that IT band issue before you do any training.
Yes.
Because they can, especially if as a triathlete, as a runner,
Yeah.
it's like the knee thing. It's like it's reoccurring for years. And it hurts. So
check out my post on the forum about knee issues in cyclists. If you search for that on forum.trainerroad.com, you'll find at least what's worked for me, and plenty of other people are chiming in on that post on what's working for them.
Do you have any more advice on that, Chad?
Just to see a physiotherapist. I mean, address it. Don't try to work through it.
And don't, like Jonathan said, if you don't like the one, they don't fix you, go see another one.
Yep. Be ready to just move through them.
I found a guy locally in Reno, Bob Oliver, who's actually a massage therapist, and he fixed my IT band issue and this other tendon issue I had. And I went to physical therapy for like 9 weeks with somebody else.
And nothing.
And it was, I had like a tendon, my peroneus longus, flipped over my fibular head. I couldn't run more than, 4 minutes without it really hurting.
So it was so tight it relocated?
Yeah.
Yep, it like flipped over it. And I did all these things, and then I saw him, and he goes, it was like 30 seconds. He goes, oh, I know what's wrong. And he goes, this is going to hurt. And he flipped it over. The next day I ran 7 miles in a row. I was like so excited.
And no pain.
No pain. And then it would flip back. But he taught me how to flip it myself.
And
it fixed it. But I mean, just
totally.
The point is, just because you're like, I did physical therapy, it's not the same. Everyone has different experiences. And one person can be good for one thing, but not good for another thing.
Yep. Tom's question, he says, if I don't feel hungry and I can still hit threshold plus power numbers or super threshold power numbers, do I still need to consciously eat? Sometimes I do 3,000 kilojoule rides and only eat around 200 calories, but I'm still able to hit my numbers. So my advice with this one is to, instead of thinking about the work that you feel right now or the strain that you feel right now, when you're fueling, yes, you're feeling the workout now, but you're also fueling for the next workout, for the next day.
Yeah. I mean, depending on the intensity he's working at, is he talking about threshold level effort?
Above.
Did I catch that?
Yep.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to require some sugar. I mean, even if you're fat adapted and you can work at 90% of VO2 max, that'd be maybe the only instance where I'd say you don't need a sufficient amount of carbohydrate intake over the course of a ride like that.
Take it in. It's not going. If you're training effectively and you're burning 3,000 kilojoules and you're only eating 200 thereafter, 200 calories, bringing it in.
You might just be really good at utilizing fat. That's
sure. But just the same, there's no reason that you can't improve your performance more.
Could be an under-assessed FTP too, and you're not actually working at that high a percentage.
Sure.
That's a toughie.
And over time, but the point that I'm getting at here is that over time, you'll get to a point, if you continue with that the training will ramp up and you'll get to a spot where you're just running out of energy. So think about, once again, when you're fueling, you're thinking about what's coming afterward, not just what's going on right then in that moment.
We got time for one more?
Yep, let's do one more.
Any logic in doing plans backwards?
This is the one that we covered there.
Did you just say?
Yeah, we did. Yeah.
Okay, I wasn't listening.
He missed the whole question.
He did. That's what happens when you're face deep in questions like this. So
sorry, everyone.
It's okay. All right. So thanks everybody for joining us. Thanks for joining us on YouTube and Facebook, for submitting your questions to trainerroad.com/podcast. Thanks for checking out all that we do here at Trainer Road. You can do so at trainerroad.com, and please share Trainer Road with your friends. It will make them faster, but that will in turn make you faster. And it helps us out. That's for sure.
Next week. Is it going to be at the same time, though?
No. Yeah, we covered that one, too.
No, you said, though, it's at Thursdays, but next week, I don't know what time we're going to do it next week.
Yeah, we don't entirely know yet either.
It might not be out till Monday or Tuesday.
Yep, absolutely.
So just expect that, everybody.
Yep. Hopefully we can do something, but like Nate said. So stay tuned for the next podcast episode where we talk about, we laid out our plans last week, our great plans on how 24 hours of the Old Pueblo, how we're going to be prepared. We'll see how that actually ends up working once we ride the course and try. So if you're going to be at 24 hours in the Old Pueblo, we will see you there. Come see us. Don't be worried about it. We may have some bottles and stickers and stuff with us, and we're looking forward to seeing you all. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.